Check two. It's really him, the man himself.
Wow. Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
Oh my goodness gracious. Oh my goodness gracious. Lennon Smash. What a start to the stream. Jesus H. Christ. Jeezum Crow, as we say sometimes. Thank you, Lennon Smash. Jesus, that was very kind of you. I really appreciate that. My goodness.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
I don't think I do the dance as good as I did it in that GIF. Good lord. Moss World, thank you for the 5 gifted subs as well. Elite status for Moss World. In Twitch's only Twitch's only 2-dimensional triangle-shaped friendship access and trickle-down clout tiered reward system. Thank you, Moss. I really appreciate that. And thank you also to Sinchal, our friend Sinchal, for the 26 entire months of tier 3. Thank you, Sinchal. Excellent things happen when I don't have to be at work. We love it. More of you should skip your jobs and celebrate in the same way. I think that's good. I'm not an official financial advisor, but I think that's good. It's a good thing to do. It's good for your sense of like well-being, your sense of self. You know, you have a little day off. You're sharing some of the spoils with good old Rob's here. Good old Rob talking you through all this, etc. You know? I would advise anyone to do that. It's a great way to celebrate. It's literally praxis and doing politics. And that's how you become an official socialist. Actually.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Lennon Smash.
It's been
I really appreciate
23 months since I first subscribed to the Rob Rousseau Show, but it has been only 2 days since Rob licked an egg. You can do anything you put your mind to, including peer pressure someone from another country to take their life in their own hands by licking an unwashed egg that is born in and transported.
I got cut off right at the end there. I believe what that said was I was born and then transported through total goodness. Cleanliness. I'm pretty sure that's how that ended. Totally keeping health standards in mind and totally up to snuff, up to regulation. Total goodness. We all know that commonly used phrase. But thank you, Marty, for the 23 months resub at tier 2 and for all the support that you've shown the channel, even igniting iconic TRRS moments like the time that I licked an egg. That's all you. And Marty, I know you don't need me to tell you this. We're very close to a hype train, by the way. I know you don't need me to tell you this, but you are indeed 1 short month away from the elite exclusive TRRS 24-month golden sub badge. So close. And again, if there's any new community members, anyone that's just tuned in over the last couple of weeks and months, and if you get intimidated by the whole 24-month sub badge thing, that's the first step. That's the first step, is you got to get the 1 month. It's like being in recovery, but good. I mean, being in recovery is good as well. I'm going to move off from that. But it just takes one month at a time. That's all I'm saying. The time you licked an egg, the time you did the stone cold drinking beers movement that I clipped faster than anything I've ever clipped before. One of those moments when I did that gesture of the beer drinking and I like caught a glimpse of myself in the camera and I was like, Do you have that clip actually? If anyone hasn't seen it, I think this is just like a manly gesture. I'm obviously imitating the Texas Rattlesnake, Stone Cold Steve Austin, in his classic beer bath celebration. There are some sick individuals in this chat, though. There are some absolutely sick individuals in this chat that try to read into things sometimes. They try to read into things sometimes. Very unfortunate behavior. Like, this is just clearly, I'm clearly doing the Stone Cold Steve Austin beer bath celebration that we've all seen. I don't see what the big problem is. There's sickos everywhere these days, Eric. You gotta watch out. Take your minds out of the gutter, thank you. Thank you. Some real sickos in this community. Really sick sickos. You hate to see it. My first Rob clip ever. He says, hold on.
What did Ben Garrison do with Snow White's mommy milkers? What did Ben Garrison do with Snow White's mommy milkers?
Ugh. This is the show where we dare to ask the questions that no one else wants to ask. No other journalists want to ask these hard-hitting questions, folks. No other journalists are willing to speak truth to power in this way, in the way that we do in this community. Okay, that's why you trust me. That's why you love me. Because I'm willing to go to that place, that special place of journalism that only few have gone before, and ask those kinds of tough, hard-hitting questions. 2 entire years ago since the Snow White's mommy milkers comment. How time has flown. How time has flown. It's pretty hard. It's hard to believe. I distinctly remember sitting down for the first episode of TRRS, then known as The Rob Rousseau Show, and being like, hey, I'll try this whole Twitch streaming thing. This seems kind of interesting. And then a few people like subscribed to the channel, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I was like, now I have to do this every single day of my life. No problem. I will just do this every single day of my life. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? That's just a recipe for success. For a successful individual. Shades of Jack Allison pre-show termination. Don't worry, I'm stuck here. So you don't need to worry. You don't need to worry, Doc. I'm not going anywhere. This is all I have. This is all I've got now. I have you, the chat. This is my life now. I've just accepted it. I don't even have anywhere to go. I miss Jack AM as well. It was great having Jack on the show a couple weeks ago. That was a lot of fun. I always really enjoy talking to him. And a bunch of our regular chatters came from Jack AM streams. We should look at some of the older clips. That's always fun. It's an impromptu clip segment. What about that? What about an impromptu clip segment? Because we've got a lot of 24-month sub badges in the chat, but we got a lot of new community members as well. We got a lot of new community members as well, folks. What is it? This is so early. This is September 3rd, 2019. This is even before the official start of the show. That it's probably going to be another liberal government, possibly a minority, but maybe even just a liberal majority in this coming election. And like I said, that wouldn't be the worst case scenario, but it would still not be great. And we also have this like a very far right party now, the People's Party of Canada, led by this guy Maxime Bernier. There's a good chance they're going to pick up a bunch of seats. What's this one? That's so long ago. Jesus. Some violence or whatever. Like, I'm pretty liberal. Not liberal, but I'm pretty like open about some violence or whatever. Like, I'm pretty liberal. I fucking can't get away with anything. Not liberal. I can't get away with anything over here. Jesus.
Anything good happening in Canada?
No, not really. This election is awful. It's not as awful, and it's mercifully much shorter than the United States one. What is that lighting? But I'm not enjoying it.
Yeah.
What is that lighting?
31 days.
Yes, yeah, kids.
The only thing that I am
teens
enjoying
is this is years ago. That's right. That's right, Zoomers. Really bad lighting. Jesus. It's really not good. Live from Plato's Cave. Live from Plato's Cave. Here was look at this. Gaming stream. Got my upgraded shotgun. Wow. No camera or anything on from the PS4.
If you got anything to confess, this would be the place to do it. All right. Time to sack up. Ellie, come on. Look, there's a school.
Oh, Billstown. Here's my return. Here's my return to Twitch. I think this is the official start of TRRS. October 26, 2020. I don't really know what that means. Maybe I'll just talk more into the mic like this. And in fact, I have to adjust this as well. So I see Lana asked what energy drinks that I like.
So everyone knows about and if you subscribe to the channel, you'll see the animation of me drinking my preferred energy drink, Rain.
2 whole years ago, folks. This is me. This was us.
How much I love.
This is a funny camera angle. This is a short-lived Office Space there for me. There, funny camera angle. I always threw on the footage of the abandoned malls.
How much I love capitalism and Jeff Bezos. Yep, that's right. Well, the whole left-wing grift thing is not really working out. I think if I had gotten an opportunity to think about that more ahead of time, it seems so. If you're like a capitalist or a right-wing guy, it's so fucking easy to just be like, yeah. I love billionaires. You know what I love? Oil companies, and they'll just like.
Which one's this, John? I don't remember this at all. Hillary Clinton is a good woman. Big NATO guy. Oh my. I don't recall. I think this one may be a deep fake. I think that's probably a deep fake. I wouldn't worry about that. Here's from the election, and here's where the show really kicked off.
A high amount. Compared to, I mean, I know obviously there's a lot of people on the left that are just like, look, I can never vote for somebody that sponsored the 94 crime bill and voted for the Iraq war. And
was credibly accused of sexual assault as well.
Honestly, those are all very valid reasons to recuse yourself.
Yes.
Well, and that's the thing I've been kind of trying to hammer home on the various podcasts and things that I've been doing, which is that even if you are some random Bernie and Bush,
out of the E himself, guaranteed.
Well, listen, I know like some college professors, and I know, and there's people like
this is when I was in a beef war with Dean Blundell.
Right? So anything the military does is wrong because they're part of the colonialist structure. Anything that's has to do that's connected to Remembrance Day is really just connected to like white supremacy, militant colonialism.
That's right, James.
Blah blah blah. And so the poppy is really just a symbol.
That's right, sir. Dean Blundell is he's this deranged Canadian lib guy. I don't know. He was freaking out about people wearing poppies because that's what we do in this country. That's what we do in this ridiculous country. We get mad at one another for not wearing enough poppies in November. And Dean was freaking out about it, and then I got in a little argument with Dean. Dean Blundell. I could rock a corduroy blazer, James. I do have a blazer with like the elbow patches and everything. Poor Dean. No, poor Dean. No. Dean does not deserve your sympathy.
Basie, I was still playing.
Okay,
God, he's so
gotta
young.
find the other imposter. We just got rid of Carlos.
He's so young.
Let us see where we are. Carlo.
There's Christo. Christo didn't kill us.
Christo.
Listen to how much.
Christo.
Listen to how he immediately doesn't trust Christo Ivalis. Listen to how he says his name.
Christo.
Oh man, he's so young there. This kid is so big now. He's like a person. He's like a giant dude now. It's just absurd. He's still just a little guy there. Aw.
This is so stupid. What a stupid country. No offense. You know, if you're American, if you're watching, I love you, okay? I love my American friends. I only want good things to happen to you. I want you to get your 2K stimmy checks. I want you to get your health care. All that stuff. As a country, overall, it's not good, though. Walk up the steps and that doesn't reflect on you. It's not your fault. I'm going to turn to Jeremy Bash, Chief of Staff of the CIA. And the As a country, it's just I'm not a fan. Under President Obama and it's not good. Contributor and Jeremy, you know Arlington National Cemetery very well. What does it mean? It's not a good country. The new
I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry. This is all pre-COVID. Oh wait, is it? Oh wait, no, that's right. Sorry, I'm getting confused on the timeline because COVID has been around for so fucking long. Not really, because there's a couple from pre-COVID, because I started streaming in like 2019, just on a very, very rudimentary on like my laptop. So there's a couple, but like the TRRS, the Rob Rousseau show, whatever you want to call it, didn't really start until right before the election, and like the election and covering the inauguration and all that stuff was how we started kind of getting into the regular routine of streaming. So this iteration of TRRS has always been COVID. Listen, if I could put my body into an 8-foot tall blue guy right now, I would do that if that was an option. It's not an option for me, though. Listen, if I could put my body into an 8-foot tall blue guy right now, I would do that if that was an option. You people are such perverts. I'm sorry to say. And I remember the Dean Blundell getting fired from his radio show story, Eric. Pretty grim stuff from old Dean there. You know, but you people are such perverts. I can't say anything without it being twisted and morphed and mutated into some kind of sexual innuendo. Marty, the primary culprit of this. I'm trying to react to the Avatar 2 trailer here, and Marty's turning into this weird sex thing. Unbelievable. Come on now. And every single verbal flood, every single verbal flub is, of course, meticulously cataloged, clipped, documented. It goes in the notebooks. Oh. Of course, we all remember where we were for this classic. Of course. Rob, you double your slubs if you streamed with fewer sleeves. Verbal flood, like with your mouth. That's right. That's a common expression, Bup Dragon. It's a common expression. This was a good look. I was contemplating wearing this hat today and I didn't, but I feel like this was a pretty good look. Rob, you double your slubs if you streamed with fewer sleeves. If you sleemed with fewer sleeves. Every single time. I can't say one fucking thing. That, I guess, is worth it. Talks about what it was like for the average person in the fall of the hot tub. Talks. Because now it's getting to the point where I know what's going to happen. About what it was like for the average person in the fall of the hot tub. So now I know. Now when it happens, like I know exactly what's going on. Rob's absolutely destroying chatter in that moment. What are you trying to say? I was talking about the Soviet Union, but I think we had some kind of banter about my son's diet, which I also referred to as a buy-it. And my mind, sometimes when you're talking, you're remembering something, and you're reading the chat at the same time, and your wires get crossed, okay? Your wires get crossed. Fucking sue me. Why don't you try doing this, chat? You try sitting here 4 hours a day, every single day, and I'm sure everything is going to be 100% perfect, won't it? I'm sure everything you say will just be 100% accurate. And you'll never stutter, and you'll never get confused. You'll never lose your train of thought. Oh, no. Ooh, look at me. I'm the chat. Sometimes I misspell things in chat, but people are forgiving because I'm a nice guy. Well, I'm nice, Eric. I'm nice. I'm nice. It would be so awful. I'd get mad at myself and just flip off chat and shut my computer off. I just get bullied relentlessly. I just get bullied all the way to the bank. Buttigieg finally went to Ohio. Oh, good. The day after Trump. Now they look really great. They look really great and fucking decisive now. That's a really good move. You might as well just not go. Today, right after I finished watching the Ukraine on Fire doc about the Maidan coup, there's a little riff in the work chat about some guy being a ridiculous conspiracy theorist after bringing up the 2014 Maidan coup. It hit me harder than I thought, knowing that I'd be ostracized for my views. So thanks, Rob and Chad, for making this place a sane, rational place. A sane, rational place where we can escape the madness of reality. Oh, look at this guy. Oh. Oh. Could you react to Kane knocking on windows prank on YouTube? No, I don't think so. I don't think so, no. No, but seriously, old Dutch, like, I know it's frustrating, isn't it? And I'm happy it can be that island of sanity as well. You know, it's been an island of sanity for me also. The whole stuff with the Maidan is just ridiculous, you know? Saying that's a conspiracy theory when you've got, U.S. politicians there just hanging out with the protesters. And you've got all the evidence that the U.S. is deeply implicated in it. To still suggest that that's a conspiracy theory requires a really serious level of kind of mental gymnastics. I meant to say same. It's a prairie dialect, idiot. Oh, man. I wouldn't say knocking on windows. You're going to knock on some doors and get a job. Get a freaking job. Yeah, Pete going to Ohio is funny. I'm gonna save this link, Stu, and thanks for sending it. Because I wanted to look at the Trump clip and everything, and we can show that after. But let's go look at a few more of these old clips. I'm feeling nostalgic. We're looking at some of these old TRRS clips. And I'll get into the Trump clips and Buttigieg. We can talk about that, and then we can talk about more Ukraine type stuff. This was good. This is a classic TRRS moment here. Didn't we know we had such hardcore communists in this community that we're going to say this guy looks good? It has nothing to do with politics. Nothing to do with politics at all. This is just stating basic facts. And yeah, maybe I do support the DPRK, okay? Maybe I am a Jucheist sympathizer, all right? Maybe I do think Korea is one country and should go back to being one country. Maybe that is true. If that makes me a hardcore communist, just for the small crime of being a Juche sympathizer, well, maybe I am then. There's a great moment where it's the first time. The first time I ever talked about North Korea. Where is that? That was a fun moment. Are these only people that are created by other people though? I don't know. I did capture the very first time that I ever discussed North Korea, and you can see the gears turning. You can see the gears turning in my head. When someone's like, "Well, you're elected, but you're not going to defend North Korea," and I was just like, and you can see this moment of contemplation. No, I think I will. I remember I linked it in the chat one time. I don't know if I can find that one. Classic. Here's some of our favorite GIFs. Gamblers, that's all in the past. Okay. This is fun. This is a productive start to the day. I think this is a good way of doing things. Clips I've created. It may have been a highlight. Some form of Robception, that's right. You call me a fool. You say it's a crazy scheme. Johnny, here's the prior to the pandemic type stuff. This is the prior to the pandemic. Now, if you're American or if you're not totally familiar with the sort of this is incredibly scuffed
political landscape.
This is very scuffed.
This is extremely depressing.
Look where we are now. Now I'm a pro.
Today,
now I'm a seasoned professional.
Basically, Canada's paper of record, the Globe and Mail, published an op-ed by this absolute fucking goblin, Ezra Levant. Press freedom applies to everyone, even the rebel. Doing his whole free speech thing.
I do look younger now. I guess that's something.
The Globe and Mail. And this is Ezra Levant and Rebel Media. This is like Canada's InfoWars.
What lies behind the door? The one behind me there is a bathroom.
Conspiracy theory website that peddles dangerous white nationalist conspiracy theories. Like we've talked about. Like
I've really been doing this for a while now. Oh, here we go. Here's the fateful moment. The fateful day.
Okay, but Rob, we have slurs to call you if you say literally anything nice about an enemy country. Tanky. Yeah.
You see the gears turning.
I wish more people that are like Twitch streamers they literally call themselves, they're like, I'm a communist. I think communism is good. And then they'll like talk about how much they hate tankies. And it's like, okay.
Hey, Mom, I find it interesting that you refer to the Weekly World News as
I love communism, except every single instance where communism has ever been attempted in the world.
When was this clip? This was... It's a good question. That information doesn't seem to be on the screen at the moment.
People defend North Korea, so Bonap, listen, you can't talk about North Korea without talking about imperialism and how North Korea is a traumatized nation that was bombed into fucking oblivion in the Korean War, was partitioned, which is a common tactic by these imperialist powers. They partitioned India, they partitioned Korea, and has been under threat, like under sanction and military threat now for their entire existence.
Vietnam and Israel
we can,
as well.
We can criticize the fact that that as according to our perception, people don't have the same level of human rights there or autonomy as we do, but like we have to accept sort of responsibility in that. And like if you're someone in North Korea and your country was completely bombed and traumatized, and your fellow countrymen were fucking mass murdered, at an absolutely grotesque level by the United States and Canada and these other Western imperialist powers, wouldn't it kind of make sense to stand behind the kind of like strong government leader that has presented himself or themselves, as the Kim family has done, as being the kind of like protector against that? That's again, this is in Black Shirts Unread as well. It's siege socialism. Like, this is a country that's been under siege, economic siege, military siege, for its entire existence. And so I will actually defend the DPRK for that exact reason, because like we have played a large role, whatever conditions there that we're like denouncing from, again, our comfortable perch here in the imperial core. We've played a large role in creating that exact situation. Yeah, they want to be left alone, and frankly, I think Korea wants to fucking reunite and be one country. The whole fact that there's North and South Korea is that's an invention of the
Who is this guy?
Western,
oh my goodness,
imperialist powers. We created that situation, and I think most peace activists
subversive individual
in South Korea and North Korea want, like, that's why we should have supported Trump to in his quest to normalize that relation, because that's what. If you talk to like peace activists and people in South Korea, they want the U.S. military to fucking leave, and they want to like be one country again.
No, that's all. That was March 18th, 2021. March 18th, 2021. I don't know. So I don't know what that was. Little impromptu clip show. I don't know what prompted that. It's always fun to take a little stroll down memory lane. Have you considered that when rebuilding after the Korean War, the DPRK put all the special brainwashing stuff in all matter? That's right. That's the one thing that the tankies don't want to admit. It's just kind of a strange feeling having been doing this for a long time now. You know, it's strange. It's strange to look back on this. It's kind of weird and interesting to have this like 2+ year document of like hours and hours of commentary around different things. You know, it's one of the interesting things about like creating content and podcasting and stuff. You can really, like, since I started podcasting in like 2018, You can really like, I've got hours and hours and hours of audio recorded and video kind of documenting everything that was going on. And I never would have like, and my feelings on it, my thoughts on it. You can see this whole political journey from where I started to like where I am now. It's one of the interesting things about doing that kind of content creation thing. Like it's I never would have just like kept a diary in that time. You know, I never would have just like kept a diary. But through social media and podcasting and that, I'm going to be able to like look back years from now and have this like really specific documentation of every single thing that was going on. Some sickos out there listening through all of it and taking notes. And Lord help them. Lord help them. Chin chin, everyone. Lodane's got some coffee. Some stiff at Langley. Maybe a couple stiffs. Like I was speculating yesterday, there's probably a couple of you. The couple of you. You're in some warehouse all hanging out together, having a nice big laugh at my expense. This guy thinks he has an audience. I'll bet we can get him going on a rant for like 45 minutes about like different kinds of crackers. Hey, Jeff. Watch this. 36 minutes later, and and another thing about Ritz, okay? Here's what I'd like to say to your precious Ritz cracker. And these guys are just laughing. He's still going. He's still doing it. They're all putting money down. He's going to stop soon. Now, what's the over-under? What's the over-under? 5 minutes. Is he going to still be going on about it? The only type of cracker I dislike. Now we're really doing it for real. Excuse me. I'm not a huge fan, but I don't dislike them. Excuse me. I don't really buy Ritz when I'm at the store. Very, very rarely. Wheat thins are okay. I like those little. Oh God, I don't even know how you. You know what? Forget I said anything. Forget it. Just those little like snack crackers. They're kind of like Ritz texture, but they're like a square shape. And less of a cheesy element. Maybe club crackers. Something like that. I don't know. Ooh, Toppables. Yeah, those are good. Toppables are nice. I like the Triscuits as well. The Triscuits have some pretty solid different flavors. Toppables, yeah, those are very good. You know, I'm always saying when it comes to crackers, I'm a toppable man. Anyway. Okay. This man needs some topping. Okay. Now we're doing cracker discourse for real. I did have my ramen already, by the way. I had a ramen prior to starting. I was a little hungry. Nothing really exciting there. I do have an Apple. That's when you pull up the Mayor Pete clip. Let's we'll pull up the Trump clip, I think, first. And just what a historic fucking fumble this whole thing has been by Democrats. How hard was it? This shit happened, 3 weeks ago? It took 2 weeks for Pete Buttigieg to even mention it. And then they're trying to downplay it and going like, what, it's not even that big of a deal. There's train derailments and chemical poisonings going on all the time. What's the big deal? Why are you complaining? Like, not even understanding, regardless, even if any of that's true, seeing how it's becoming a major story. And still just being like, we should just not, we're just not going to pay attention to this. They wait until Donald Trump shows up and walks in looking like a total hero and gets all these viral clips and looks like a fucking man of the people, despite being responsible for a lot of the deregulation of the train industry, the rail industry. That doesn't matter. They don't care. That doesn't matter. He's there and they're not there. And then they wait till the next day for this pencil neck McKinsey fucking loser to give a sternly worded speech after Trump has already soaked up all the headlines, and he's walking into McDonald's and just looks like the man. I don't know. It's so stupid. Like this clip when he shows at McDonald's is just like, God damn. And I saw everyone sharing it last night going, he's back. And listen, the guy's a monster, but you watch this clip and it's not hard to understand why people like him. I'm not one of those people. I do find him to be, I think he's a funny person. I think he's one of the funnier political figures, but probably the funniest figure of our lifetime. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. I don't support his politics or his policies. But you watch clips like this and it's very easy to understand why people do like him now. Here's Trump at the East Palestine McDonald's.
Enjoy your meal, and we're going to get the meals for the fire department. Okay? Hello, everybody. What's your specialty today?
How are you today? Nice to meet you.
Hello, everybody. That's a nice, beautiful looking group of people. So I know this menu better than you do. Okay?
And I believe it.
I probably know it better than anybody.
That's so relatable.
We're going to take
I had McDonald's yesterday.
Okay.
We're going to take care of the police department. And what we do is all the people that are eating.
I'm the owner, Mr. President.
So
How are you?
I don't have to give him.
That's right.
That's a good one to own, right?
Yes, it is. One of the best.
So we're going to take care of your fire police. We'll take care of that. Plus the people that are in here, they're going to get a nice free meal.
They're going to get a nice
Thank
free
you,
meal.
everybody. Thank you.
Damn.
Nice, good one, huh?
Yes, it is my first store.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How many do you have?
I have 8 stores.
Whoa, that's a wealthy guy. Huh? Is he a good boss?
He's a wonderful boss.
I can see it. So we'll take care of everything. We appreciate it.
We should all go in together and buy a McDonald's franchise. I would like to own a McDonald's franchise.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good time, okay?
I'm glad you came down. Thanks for stopping here.
Well, this is true. People mock Trump for liking McDonald's, but most people like that. That's right. That's like a normal person thing. Yeah, they show their ass by being elitist. Even the whole thing when he gave the huge McDonald's buffet to that sports team, like, God, that was one of the funniest things that has ever happened. Like, that was just unbelievably funny. And yeah, that's where people watch this and they're like, fuck, this guy's just like me. This guy's not one of these elites. This guy's walking in. He's walking in. It's not like Hillary Clinton walking into that woman's apartment looking like she's walking into a fucking cave. Remember the face she made when she walked in? Like, this is how normal people live? And just looking around like, she didn't even know what to make of it. She couldn't believe it. This man walks into a McDonald's. He knows all the menu items. He's shooting the shit with the cashiers and stuff. I'm sorry, but Hillary could never. Neither could Pete Buttigieg. What would Pete Buttigieg be doing in McDonald's? Yes, I would like one of your large Macs, but a little too much carbs. So we're going to cut down on the, we're going to look to remove the middle bun. Only one meat patty. No sauce, just totally plain. Just one bun, meat patty, no condiments, please. That's what Pete would do in trying to relate to people in McDonald's. I don't know what he sounds like. Do you have Gouda? That's my Pete Buttigieg impression. He'd be asking the employees if they're planning on unionizing so he could snitch on them. That's right. Do you have any appetizers? Any hors d'oeuvres? Hors d'oeuvres. The brie and dates. And President Xi is out there making food with people at restaurants. He shows up and they're making some noodles. And President Xi is just like, this looks amazing. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you for doing this. Is fantastic. And he's hanging out with them. It is absurd, but this is what works in the USA. It's like, it's not that complicated. Well, these McChickens free range. Trump connecting with the voters. Let's go to McDonald's. Sure, it's slop, but it scratches that little nostalgia itch. When you were a kid, you relished the trips there. Hillary connecting with the voters. Harlem Shake to the polls. Pokemon Go to vote for the blue, Team Blue. It's my turn. You'd be doing photo ops in the wine caves. That's right. The wine caves. Peels off the chicken nugget bread, and you know he's gonna eat it too, like the little rodent fingers gnawing on it. I'm conflicted because the lady at the register just looks so happy. Of course she is. She's gonna remember this day forever. Yeah, would you like someone to drink with that, Secretary Buttigieg? Just one room temperature water, please. Do you have mineral water? I try to avoid the Dasani. Do you have mineral water? You know? Let's look at more of this clip.
Happy you came down here to visit us.
Great honor.
Crystal Cavern cheeseburger.
Why are you visiting today?
Huh?
Why are you visiting today?
Well, we brought a lot of people with us, and more importantly, we brought the federal government with us because when they heard I was coming, they all came. They weren't going to come. They were going to leave you abandoned, and now they're not. The owner over here, he saw that.
I helped out all the responders and everything the first week. I was out here making egg McMuffins myself.
Fucking dumbasses.
Saturday morning.
You did a good
with
job.
These guys.
He did a good job. So give us a nice array of stuff. Take care of the people, and I'll see you later, okay?
Thank you so much.
Like I was saying before, it's like they're trying to rather than like coming down forcefully on the side of like the community that's been poisoned here against the greedy railroad oligarchs. Again, this is just like T-ball. It's like they're just stepping up to, like they're just getting served a fucking right down the pit, right down the middle of the plate, serving it up. You have this big disaster. Whatever. There's how X number of train derailments every year. This kind of shit happens all the time. Yeah, these are powerful people. Guess what? It's going to play well regardless if you just show up and come down hard on the fucking railroad barons that control this industry and show up and support the community that's been poisoned by these powerful interests. How hard is that? regardless of the reason that East Palestine became like a meme and that it became a popular big news story, you know, whether that, it doesn't matter. The point is that the fact is that it did become that big story. They had a golden opportunity to show it and just show up and come down hard against the very clear bad guys in this scenario, and they just failed to do it. And now Trump is literally, quite literally, pun intended, eating their lunch. He shows up and he just looks like a hero. T-Ball doesn't have pictures. No, I know that. Excuse me. I know that. I got confused with my analogies midway through speaking. Lodane, I know exactly what this link is. I know exactly what this link is. I don't even need to. I'm going to look at it because we're going to talk about Ukraine stuff later, but I know exactly what that link is. I don't even have to check. I think there will be a lot of liberals who cynically and maybe even correctly point out that he's doing it as a platitude, not because he cares about the people, but the people don't give a damn because all they get from either party is platitudes. That's what I mean. It doesn't mean that you have to hand it to him or that you think that he's going to do anything to actually help anyone if he's elected. Trump's not going to strengthen the union movement of rail workers. Trump's not going to come down hard against the railroad oligarchs. What people are going to remember, though, is that he showed up. We talked about this on this week's Insurgents podcast with the author of the Holler newsletter, John Russell, who's on the ground in East Palestine. He's talking about this phenomenon. I would encourage everyone to listen to this conversation, though. It's really good. We talk about this very thing. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he's not going to do anything to prevent these things from happening in the future. What matters is that he showed up. And that's what people are going to remember. Yeah, he's culpable as well. But yeah, again, it doesn't even matter. It does not matter.
Thank you all.
Can I get a picture with you?
What do you think about what's going on in East
Get a
Palestine?
picture, please.
Sir, what do you think about what's going on there in East Palestine?
President Trump, what do you think about Biden going to Ukraine and coming here?
Well, I think he should have come here.
Stevie, come
I
here.
think he should have
Come
been
here.
here.
Oh, God.
And Biden's in Ukraine handing billions of dollars over to Zelensky. That plays really well with Americans that are being chemically poisoned. Trump is there buying McDonald's for people in East Palestine, and Joe Biden is off in Kiev, excuse me, hanging out with, promising Zelensky another couple billions of dollars worth of Stinger missiles, which is gonna play better to the average person in the United States of America. You know, this shit is not rocket science. It's not that hard to figure out.
No, I got it.
He chose to
Got it, brother.
President Trump, do you think the water's safe?
It will be safe. It will be safe soon because FEMA's now coming in. FEMA was not coming, and now they're coming in.
They're coming in now that I'm here.
My mom loves you.
I know.
Want to take you live to
And I'm sorry, I've got to look at OAN footage for this, but like they're the fucking ones covering it.
East Palestine, Ohio, where President Trump is speaking at a fire station. Let's listen in.
Need, and that's what it is. It was an hour of a need, but they've done some incredible work in a very short period of time, and they're getting a lot of credit for it, and they have to be getting credit. We tell you that when they do good, and we tell you when people do bad. Your chief and your police and your mayor and everybody else, they've done incredibly. And Bill, JD's been here for 4 days. I've been watching him every day. JD Vance has been incredible. To the people of East Palestine and to the nearby communities in Ohio and Pennsylvania, we have told you loud and clear, you are not forgotten. You are not forgotten. We stand with you, we pray for you, and we will stay with you in your fight to help answer and the accountability that you deserve. We'll have that accountability. It'll all be out there very clearly. What this community needs
Fucking
now
absurd.
are not excuses and all of the other things you've been hearing, but answers and results, and that's what I think you're going to say. Say Norfolk Southern needs to fulfill its responsibilities and obligations, and I see that they're starting to come here now too, because they also were saying they're not coming. But it means that the affected communities beyond the borders of East Palestine are going to be taken care of, and they've said so, and they've said it loud and clear, and I think they probably mean it. I sincerely hope that when your representatives and all of the politicians get here, including Biden, they get back from touring Ukraine, that he's got some money left over, because we're now at $117 billion, and as you probably know, Europe, when you add it all up, is at about $10 billion. That's a big difference, wouldn't you say?
We do want to take you live to East Palestine.
Unbelievable. Like, it's beyond ineptitude, you know? It's beyond ineptitude. Like, they've just got to actively be losing on purpose. You know, what fucking focus groups do you need to look at to tell you to just show up there? To just show up in the community that's been poisoned by this unaccountable private interest? It's becoming this huge meme on social media. It's becoming this big news story. What consultancy groups do you need to, or like focus groups or polls do you need to look at to tell you to just fucking go down there? Yeah, now this carefully crafted Pete script to deflect all responsibility. Sometimes during large disasters, the case can be made showing up as pointless, mostly a distraction and security liability when experts are on site to coordinate relief efforts. Especially in early days, you know, it's just a photo op like DeSantis in white rubber boots, but this wasn't one of them. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even mean that they're really helping anything. But I mean, they didn't help anything by not talking about it for 2 entire weeks, not even mentioning it. They only mentioned it for the first time like a week ago. And literally now that everyone's outraged, now they're there. And then the day after Trump shows up, looking like a man of the people, buying McDonald's for people and saying like, you haven't been forgotten. I know the Biden administration has forgotten you, but I haven't forgotten you. And then the next day, this fucking rodent motherfucker comes in. And let's see, I don't know. I don't think we can do 30 minutes of this speech, but let's see if he comes down hard on this.
The derailment site, including our FRA, Federal Rail Administration, and PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Safety Material Administration, who are engaging with NTSB. Just to be very clear about this, FRA and PHMSA are part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. NTSB is not. They're independent for very good reason. We respect their independence, but we also work with them to make sure that we're responding to their findings and that we're supporting their fact-finding work. I was also able to spend time with a number of federal personnel, including EPA, FEMA, and others who have been doing phenomenal work from day one in order to make sure that this community is supported. That includes, again, not just the presence that our department had from the early hours of this situation, but the presence of public health personnel, environmental personnel, and emergency management response personnel. Spent time with not just federal folks, but state leaders, including Ohio Emergency Management, and local leaders from the county and from the community, council members, and the mayor. Had a good conversation with the mayor, who is clearly very focused.
Some other department's doing something, not me.
This community and helping.
Right. All these people know to do is be like, actually, even though I'm the transportation secretary, even though I'm the president, I actually have nothing to do with this. I know I'm powerless to do anything about this, believe me. He's literally just doing a stump speech about what we did right. That's right. We've just been crushing it from day one. Go tell the people that have been living in this community that. I'm sure they're very receptive to that message.
The community move forward, as well as other village staff, including the village manager, waterworks leader, and the fire chief. And I just have to say the resilience, the resolve, and the decency of this community as they have gone through both this disaster's immediate impacts and the swirl of national and international and political attention that's come their way. Their decency and resolve has been inspiring. I also want to make sure to acknowledge something that happened yesterday. A plane crash took the lives of 5 people working for CTEH. That is a firm that is involved in this cleanup. I met with some of their personnel earlier today who are mourning the loss of their friends and colleagues, some of whom were involved in this response as they were on their way to another one. And NTSB is involved in the immediate response to that crash. But my heart goes out to the people who are already in a very stressful situation here and are now having this added pain and facing it in a way that, again, is inspiring and moving. I also spoke today with the chair of the NTSB, Jennifer Hamady. As you know, they have released their initial
This is just inspiring
report.
stuff.
Their final work on this will take a while to come out. But having these factual findings is an important step toward being able to move on to the phase of policymaking. And while we will, of course, wait for their analysis and recommendations at the end of the full process to make certain judgments, we will not wait for that process to run its course to continue doing everything that we can to raise the bar on rail safety and to hold people accountable. And that's the other part of what my visit here is about, to make sure that we can assess how to drive the best safety improvements across our national transportation system. And
It's weird that you've been in power for 2 years now. We were looking at the clips of this show. You know, it's been 2 years. That's a very funny pause face also. Weirdo is just now they're getting around to this whole like these important safety regulations. But and he's going to pull this as well. But Trump rolled back these safety regulations. It's his fault. He's here trying to take credit, but it's his fault. Why didn't you you've been in there for 2 years. Why didn't you put him back? If Trump rolled back these safety regulations, why has it taken 2 years for Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg to reinstall those important regulations? Right? You can't pass the buck. You're the guys that are holding the bag now. You're holding the bag. You can't blame someone else. We did everything right, and everything that went wrong was someone else's fault. Right? That's what a child says. That's what a child says when you catch them doing something wrong. Yeah, we literally just broke a strike. We literally just broke a strike like 2 months ago. Another good pause face. For workers asking for more regulations, better safety regulations, and more sick days and things like this. Oh, they just haven't had enough time, right? You need the entire 4 years to undo all the terrible things that Trump did. And again, and John also... John Russell in the Insurgents podcast the other day, he did push back a little bit on this idea that this specific Trump regulation would have prevented this crash. We know Trump did roll back regulations governing like the brakes that are used on these trains. It's not at all clear though yet whether that would have actually affected this crash or not. So while Trump obviously does deserve criticism for that kind of thing, and obviously it's bullshit that he's claiming that he's going to support these communities when he's really just showing up and buying people McDonald's. Like, let's be clear about that. But this passing the buck also and saying we did everything right and blaming everything on the previous administration is not very accurate either. And that's not what people in this poisoned community really want to hear. You just need the last year before the election. That's right. That's when you do all the good stuff.
Figure who has decided to get involved in the plight of East Palestine. I have a simple message, which is I need your help, because if you're serious about this, there is more that we could do to prevent more communities from. You
can tell he's a Democrat because he accidentally said Palestine, and he had like a visceral reaction to it. Ugh. I'm not even supposed to say that word. He immediately corrected himself.
I'm going through this. We've laid out a set of actions that DOT is taking, some of which were already underway, others which we're adding to the agenda. A set of things that the railroad industry needs to do, including better informing communities when hazmat is coming to them, something I talked to.
We were just about to start yelling at the railway guys about all this stuff. We were just about to start. We were just like writing up all our memos. We're about to come down really hard on these railroad barons about all this stuff. And we kind of got busy with some other stuff, but we were just about to right before this happened. We were really I was writing my letter to the railway guys just the other day, and I was going to kind of sternly wag my finger at them. We were just about to start blaming all the people we've cozied up with. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Governor about and strongly agree with him on, and including steps to take care of their workers and their system, and things that we need Congress in order to work on. And again, anyone in Congress who cares about these issues, they are welcome to come to the table and work with us to get things done. So anybody who is interested in that, I'm going to hold them to that. But we're also holding ourselves to the highest.
Now it's going to be, we can't do any of this stuff. The Republicans won't work with us. The Republicans won't let us. Sorry, I shouldn't be eating and chewing at the same time. It's probably not great for our audio-only gang. I can tell the railroad barons to cut it out, or I can tell Adam Wren at Politico what to write for damage control, but I can't do both. It's fine. It's good for comedic effect because Pete is so full of shit. He really is. He really and truly is. No lie, I was sending the letter to the rail CEOs last February 24th, and then boom, Putin invaded Ukraine. An unprovoked attack. That's right. I got distracted by my love of democracy and human rights. We were just about to nail these guys to the wall right before that.
Standard in terms of the work that we're doing and the work that we're going to continue to do to both respond to this incident and to make sure that we make rail safer for everyone who lives in a community that is close to rail lines and anybody who is involved in freight rail at all. With that, happy to take a few questions.
There's a lot of trauma in this community, a lot of emotion, and as you noted, a lot of politics too. Now that you've seen the wreckage and spoken to the people, was it a mistake not to come here sooner?
What I tried to do was balance two things. My desire to be involved and engaged and on the ground, which is...
I just have this desire to be on the ground and engaged. That's why I didn't mention this for 2 weeks. I've just been itching. I've been raring to go. And Joe Biden was holding me back. I was there on day one, ready to go. And Chasten was like, no, it's too soon. You're going to get chemically poisoned. Let me get on the train. I don't care.
How I am generally wired to act, and my desire to follow the norm of transportation secretaries, allowing NTSB to really lead the initial stages of the public-facing work. I'll do some thinking about whether I got that balance right, but I think the most important thing is, first of all, making sure that the residents here have what they need, something that from our piece of the puzzle, DOT, we were working on from day one, and making sure we do something for the future. We can talk about process, and that's perfectly fair. But I don't want people pointing to process as a way to get away from the fundamental questions of rail safety, regulation, and accountability, and whether we're going to make it tougher or whether we're going to allow it to continue being watered down.
We're getting tough.
To speak to residents here since you've been on the ground, and just to follow up, since you have had some time now.
I'm probably just too dedicated.
Should you have come a little sooner?
So again, in terms of the timing of the visit, I'm trying to strike the right balance, allowing NTSB to play its role, but making sure we're here in that show of support. But in terms of the residents, which is what this is really about, the really striking thing to me is how they're here for each other. Now, this is not a community with infinite resources. Speaking with the mayor, hearing about what he has been through, and remembering
probably because it's been deindustrialized by Democrats.
I am really impressed with how they've been able to support one another. and they're not here for the politics. They're here to make sure this community can move forward.
But other than the mayor, sir, have you spoken to any other residents?
Yeah, I spoke with community, two members of the council. Spoke with a lot of community residents who were involved in their capacities responding to this, and all of them. I just really admire their decency as well as. What are you telling these residents who are concerned about their livelihoods? Well, first of all, I want them to know they're not alone. That before, during, and after the national attention, they're going to have support. They're going to have support from us when it comes to holding Norfolk Southern accountable. They're going to have support from the EPA when it comes to making sure they get accurate information about the safety of their air, water, and soil. And I think they can have support, they ought to have support from a whole country that has seen what they've been through, above and beyond the kind of legalities of it. The point is to make sure that they're taken care of for the long run.
Would you tighten regulations so that trains in the future carrying chemicals like vinyl chloride will have to be registered as high hazard flammable trains?
I think that is something that we need to look at. Look, let me be clear about one thing, though. These trains were regulated as hazardous material, but they were not in that higher category called high hazard flammable train. That's a category that was created mainly with crude oil in mind, and it was largely a response to the derailment that killed 47 people in Canada in the early part of the last decade. I understand why that there's something particularly dangerous about certain kinds of flammable liquid like crude oil, but I think just at a common sense level, you ask yourself, if there's a category called high hazard flammable train, and this train that led to that toxic cloud and that consequence for this community wasn't in it, what's going on there? And so it's one of many things that we're looking at.
It's an important question, yeah.
But also want to work with Congress on. And also, that 2015 rule that's getting a lot of attention around ECP brakes wouldn't have applied to a non-high hazard flammable train. But I think we got to ask, what other trains should that have applied to in the first place? And can Congress untie our hands a little bit in terms of the hoops we've got?
Our hands are just tied by Congress
on those braking rules, because Congress pushed it in the opposite direction, just like the tank cars. I mean, when you see the twisted metal there, you realize the difference between a fortified tank car and some of the tank cars that don't have that level of fortification.
you can tell, like Sid Shell's saying, he's been briefed now. He's been briefed on all the different train stuff, so now he's throwing out the train lingo. This was a Class A hazardous material train, and I'm wondering why this wasn't one of those old N2s from the 80s that were retired that would have been better for this kind of thing. He's just like bringing the random factoids about the trains and stuff. And on the way over there, is looking at the PowerPoint with all the different train parts and stuff. Make sure you reference at least 3 of these train parts in the interview. Reference at least, just pick 3. Pick 3 out of these 9 or 10 train terms and make sure you hit these. Make sure you hit these in the interview and make it sound natural. We need to strengthen the left phalanges. Yeah. Jesus.
Target date for getting that done, changing some of the tank cars, was 2025. It got pushed out, watered down to 2029. Again, I am being careful not to weigh in on what tank car fortifications might have made a difference here, because NTSB is doing that work. But I'm just saying, in general, hazardous materials could be going through communities in stronger tank cars. Let's speed that up. So I'm calling on the railroads not to wait on us making them, and the companies that they work with to require that.
We were just about to do this.
Push that date back up.
A week and a half before you sent your first tweet expressing concern for the residents of East Palestine. A week and a half after the accident happened.
Someone needs to do something about this, folks.
To express anything, hours after you had addressed the makeup of work crews on highway construction projects just that very day.
The answer to your question is yes. I felt strongly about this and could have expressed that sooner. Again, I was taking pains to respect the role that I have and the role that I don't have, but that should not have.
The NTSB sent a letter to the Obama administration in 2015 asking them to reclassify hazardous chemical trains to have stricter regulations, and they sided with the chemical and rail lobbies. I see. There was a proposition to do that after Lac Megantic, and they were like, actually, let's not make better tanker cars. Yeah. That sounds about right.
stop me from weighing in about how I felt about what was happening to this community. Sorry, it's really hard to hear.
The reason I didn't say look at the faces. Oh my God. The reason I didn't say anything for the 2 weeks is because I was just so outraged. I was afraid of what I was going to say. That's why I didn't mention anything about this for 2 weeks. And now I'm here acting like it's really a huge priority the day after Donald Trump showed up. Those 2 weeks though, I was just so outraged. I had to put my phone away. I couldn't talk about it because I was afraid of what was going to happen. My biggest flaw is that I care too much. I researched this yesterday. The Obama admin did push some improvements which Trump repealed, but those improvements would not have had an impact in this case. Yeah, that's the whole thing with the brakes, right? And folks, you don't know how many dogs I had to kill to keep my outrage under control. I would hate to see the DC animal shelters right now. They're just hollowed out.
The third hot variant detector was at 253 degrees before critical failure was alerted. Did the crew do what they were supposed to do? Was the equipment that was used by Norfolk Southern the right equipment for the job? And, I mean, more importantly, could this have been prevented?
Right. So part of that I really have to let NTSB speak to. And by the way, I think they have an availability at 1 o'clock where they'll go into more detail. But what I will say is those hotbox detectors represent an example of a piece of safety equipment that right now is not required by regulation. And so there are differences from railroad to railroad, from company to company, in terms of how they're used. I think that's another example of something that needs to be looked at to try to prevent things like this from happening again.
You made common sense steps the other day.
Yeah.
This morning I heard you talking with the officials down at the train derailment site, and they mentioned that the placards that said high hazardous materials were plastic and burned right away. For future responses to things like this and first responders acting quickly, they don't know what's in those train cars. You mentioned common sense earlier. What moves forward and what did you learn that you could implement going forward?
That's right. That's one of the reasons I'm glad I was able to see this site directly. The moment you see the twisted metal of those tank cars, you understand how a placard indicating the hazardous material on board
You said that
will not
already.
survive for more than a second.
You already hit this
Heat
talking point.
that this site created. It's one of the reasons why we called for railroad companies to proactively share more information on the hazardous materials on their trains moving through communities. That goes through a piece of software called Ask Rail. I think we need to raise the bar on what's expected and on what's required. But I think the railroad industry should be doing more out of the gate. Let me mention one other thing.
We're going to get right on that.
Responders. Matter of fact, through some of our programming, about 4,000 first responders in Ohio alone have been.
Have you looked at our railway app?
I think another thing we can do is continue to increase access so that we know they have access to that Ask Rail app and the funding they need and the training they need.
We need to get them the access to that app.
To use it and proactively feed their information out there.
I don't know, folks. You just need to do a simple compare and contrast to Trump versus this, and what's going to be more appealing to people. And it's not even people in this community. People around the country are watching this. You know? This McKinsey ass motherfucker. We're making an app, okay? The app's going to be ready. That's why I haven't been here for 3 weeks. We were beta testing that, the railway safety app that we're putting out now. Yeah, we politely asked them to investigate and regulate themselves. What more do you want? That's right. This is everyone else's fault but mine. We had nothing to do with this. Text trade to 30330. "100% beat practices as grown-up faces in the mirror." For sure, like... Yeah. Once that app is implemented, this kind of thing will never happen again. I don't know. It's just like, you don't even need to hand it to Trump. I think Trump's a monster. Honestly, I do. It's just very easy to understand, I think, when you see Trump, why you understand that there's a base of people that would like die for him, while everyone that sees Pete Buttigieg is just like, get this man off my television. Get him off. You know, it's just, that's all. We don't need to say that anything that Trump stands for is good. But it's very, very easy to understand this kind of concept. With the experts and developers of the Iowa Primary Shadow Program to design this new app. That's right. The Shadow app folks got involved with our railway safety app. No one would take a bullet for Pete. No, not even his most ardent supporters. You know? Is there anything else we need to say? I saw someone pass through this video about these people in the community.
Brother, he was like laying next to the air vent and he got a rash on his cheek.
Wrapped in Trump flags.
Like we've all been having like runny noses since it happened.
Little kids thank you, Donald Trump. Huge sign outside with the Trump 24 sign. Kids wrapped in Trump flags. You think any kid has ever wrapped themselves in a Pete Buttigieg flag? Yeah, they're in for life now.
And like headaches and stuff. But then when we go out of town in like Robinson or something, or we feel better, and then when we come back, it's like happened again. And when we come into town, like our eyes start burning and stuff.
Anything for you?
My nose has just been really runny. That's it.
My left eye, I have like, it was burning, and my mom has chemical burns in her eyes.
And high hopes on a
like,
I don't remember the dance
Gross.
at all.
Something else too. When I like take a shower with the shower water, I end up getting like burns all over my legs. Like it itches and burns.
And have you all been back into school now since this? What has it been like in school so far?
It's been like normal.
Yeah, but they
Nothing
haven't
really
like
changed.
closed the water fountains or nothing. Kids are just going up there and drinking the water.
Yeah, I don't drink the water in the first place. I don't drink the water either.
The drinking water
good.
fountains in the schools are not blocked off?
Great.
Yeah, they're not blocked off. They let you drink out of them.
I'm wrapped in a
still.
Pete flag as we
I
speak.
mean, that sounds crazy. And are people, I mean, obviously it sounds like you all aren't drinking it. Are other kids drinking it in school?
Yeah, but I don't drink. I've never drank in like the school water.
Not a lot of kids are drinking it because our teachers have water bottles in the back of the classroom.
The fact that they're not blocked off, though, seems not great.
No, it does not. No, it does not, sir. Good. So, I don't know. I still think Trump's the favorite. I don't see anyone. I know the Republican and the conservative establishment would be thrilled if someone else stepped to the plate. I don't think anyone's going to beat Trump in this primary. What, Nikki Haley? Nikki Haley's going to beat Trump? What's he calling Ron DeSantis now? Meatball Ron? Meatball Ron is never going to recover from that. Meatball Ron he will be known as Meatball Ron for the rest of his entire career now. And Trump's going to make a basic bargain with this Republican establishment, and he's going to say, like, if you go against me, I'm out, and all my people are going to be out as well, and they will be. Kind of off topic, but I just noticed the babushka emote today. Why do we not have one of that beautiful old man who said that your grandfather deserved it? I actually did create one. I'm going to rotate in some new emotes. Lodane made some amazing emotes. We got new emotes coming in. I just haven't had the time to sit down and set everything up. I did make a Stalinist grandpa emote, though. Meatball Ron is something he wanted to say a year ago, and now some fired advisor said, go with Ron DeSanctimonious. That's right. That was never going to fly. One crazy, depressing thing is reading a lot of the major media coverage of this. They're presenting it as 100% Trump's fault, and people online seem to eat that up. I wonder if they'll be able to push this under the rug for the election because people just don't care about a working class community. I don't know. I mean, I think this is going to play very well in Trump ads, you know? Again, this is the kind of... You go on TikTok and see how people are talking about East Palestine on TikTok. This is a huge social media meme. It's one of the biggest news stories on social media. And you just need to do a simple ad. Like, while Joe Biden was off in fucking Kiev, handing out billions of dollars to these neo-Nazi militias, Donald Trump, man of the people, was in East Palestine showing up firing off zingers in McDonald's, you know, hanging out with the community members. That's going to play very well across the country, not just in this one community. You know, what was Meatball Ron doing when there was a disaster in Florida? He's walking around in these boots, looking like an asshole, allowing Joe Biden to come in, doing the exact opposite of what just happened in the situation, allowing Joe Biden to come in and look like the man of the people, while Meatball Ron is just like, oh, my boots. Oh, I don't want to get any water on my pants. Oh, no. Yeah, that's going to look great. That's going to look great for these people. Trump splitting the Republican Party is all fun and good, but he needs to run as an independent to make sure both right wings lose. If he wins the nomination, it's going to be close. No, I don't think he will. That's the thing. I think he's going to win this primary, and it is going to be close. And I'm not even saying that's fair. I'm not, but that's the reality. Oh no, my pants. Hello, Danger Dave Ball. Hello. What's up? What is up? What is up indeed? It's a good question. So I don't know if we can continue talking about this subject. I know there is a breakthrough news video on Ukraine, considering that's also part of this storyline, because we got Biden, while Trump is in there looking like a hero, hanging out at McDonald's. You got Biden handing out billions of dollars to Zelensky. Trump is a lock for the GOP primary. Libs coping hard right now, though. I'm inclined to agree, Dave. I'm inclined to agree. I take no pleasure in reporting this, but I think he's got it, and it's going to be very close. I thank you for trying to share the picture, JW Grimey, but I'm actually blocked by that, whoever that is, John Cooper. I'm blocked by John Cooper. I'm blocked by a wide variety of people on Twitter. So sometimes I can't look at all the content there. Because I've been, not anymore. I'm a good boy now and nice. I have at times before on Twitter in the past acted like a little bit of a stinker, I would say. So I am blocked by a fairly wide variety of people on there. Do you think it's going to be Trump versus Biden 2.0? I mean, the Dems don't have anybody else. You know, I'm sure there's people in the Democratic Party that would like Biden to step aside, and they've been bending over backwards to try and turn Kamala or trying to turn Pete into like the next in line. No one likes them, though. In fact, it's been kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy because they've put them in these positions and handed them these big tasks that they could never possibly hope to contribute to meaningfully. Everyone hates them still. Despite it's now like 4 years since they've been trying to promote these two, especially along with Beto and a number of others that they've tried to promote as like the next generation. No one likes them. No one cares. That's what I've talked about this before, but that's that whole Democratic primary. That's all it was, right? It was just this like weekly audition. And every week it was someone else. Every week, or, you know, every like couple of weeks maybe, there was a news cycle and someone else got the little shine. And they were really just running all their marketing campaigns and their focus groups or whatever. And they were trying to get the next in line, trying to raise the next generation. You know, you had Kamala at first. You had the Pete Buttigieg moment. You had Beto. He's taking pics on the coffee tables, folks. He's jumping on the counter. He's jumping on the counters at restaurants. Look at this. Who is this guy? You know? No one's buying it. So I'm sure that they would like to run someone that's not Joe Biden, but they don't have anyone. They don't have anyone. And it's certainly, they're certainly not going to let Bernie do it. I'm sorry, Diego. I'm going to be canceled again. I'm getting canceled. Gillibrand Cuomo 24. It's wonderful. Yeah. I'm sure that would be great. So Trump already won? I don't know. I don't want to claim to know exactly what's going to happen. I think he's got a good chance, though. It would be foolish to write him off. I mean, I wrote Trump off in 2016. I just won't make that mistake again. Maybe he won't win. I'm fairly confident that he'll win that Republican primary, but I know it would for sure be close against Biden. And I would not write him off. Some damn celebrity will run as VP to Hollywood Kamala. Kamala and Ellen DeGeneres. That'll drive the QAnon people into an absolute frenzy. This is a good point too, Dakadoon. Biden has tied himself to the Ukraine war. Ukraine will have lost by the next election. No way Biden can win. I mean, they're not going to win, certainly, as we've outlined a number of times, but it's already very unpopular. It's already becoming very unpopular with like average American people, besides the people that are still have the Ukraine flag in their bio, the like MSNBC watchers or whatever. But you already have this contrast now of Biden in Ukraine and Trump in East Palestine. I mean, that's really says it all right there. We may even have blowback by then. That's right. You did the wrong face at the thought of Ellen. That's good. People say it a lot, but I think Biden's obvious dementia is really going to hurt him against Trump. He's honestly pretty sharp and quick on his feet. I mean, it's like, I think Trump has taken some time off because he was obviously not looking cognitively that great either, Trump, but I think the lack of constant pressure over the last couple of years, he's mellowed out a little bit. He's got some of his zip back. That's right. Ellen will be endorsed by Bush. That's right. You know, if we're going to pivot to Ukraine as well, let's watch a breakthrough news video about this. Before I watch the video, though, would just like to briefly remind people that if you enjoy watching TRRS on twitch.tv, please subscribe. Please subscribe to TRRS on twitch.tv. And if you are unfamiliar with what this community is about, well, I've got a clip for you. I'm actually just trying to find it. I got like way too many tabs open here. I just want to give a brief little video presentation explaining what the community is about, if you don't mind indulging me on this. And then we'll move on and we will watch this breakthrough news video on Ukraine. But remember, if you enjoyed this commentary and you love being part of this community, folks, the only way that this community and this content stays on the air on twitch.tv is through the extreme, boundless generosity of our wonderful community members in the Friendship Triangle community. Well, what is the Friendship Triangle, you ask? Well, that's a good question. And to answer your question, here is this little video. Please subscribe to the channel. Here we go.
Thank you for expressing interest in the Friendship Triangle community. We would be thrilled to have you on board as a member of our exclusive platform. As you may know, the Friendship Triangle is Twitch's only two-dimensional, triangle-shaped, friendship access and trickle-down clout tiered reward system. Today you have an amazing opportunity to join the base level of the Friendship Triangle system. Once you are part of the community, you'll have the ability to rise through the ranks and achieve higher levels of access and rewards. One way to do this is by gifting subscriptions to your fellow members or by inviting your friends and family members to join our community. As you ascend the tiers, you will be exposed to a range of new and exciting benefits, such as exclusive content, advanced features, and access to our elite community members. We are confident that you will enjoy all the perks that come with being part of the Friendship Triangle. However, we also want to remind you that not all friends and family members are to be trusted, especially those who may not support your new lifestyle. That's why we encourage you to focus on building meaningful relationships within our community, where you will find like-minded individuals who share your interests and values. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to our team. We are always here to support our members and ensure that your experience with the Friendship Triangle is enjoyable. We're glad that you are considering joining the Friendship Triangle community. We look forward to seeing you rise through the chaos zone and all the way into the elite tier. It's not a cult. Thank you.
So that's it. That's the Friendship Triangle community, folks. Please, if you can, subscribe, give subscriptions or friend coin. Join the community.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Re-upping my inoculation.
Thank you very much, Tiniest Boop, for the resub. 19-month resub at tier 1 from Tiniest.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And thank you to GMO Radio as well for the gifted sub. Very kind of you. GMO Radio, thank you. Very much appreciated. I just got to take a few moments here, do a little business, and we're going to continue with the stream, and we're going to watch this breakthrough news video on the Ukraine. We got some sirens going by here. You know what I was watching earlier? Hey, Sunny Solo, what's up? You know what I was watching earlier was we're slubbing over here. I hope so. I'd like to see maybe a couple more slubs come in before we move on from this. What I was watching earlier, though, was the bank robbery shootout scene in Michael Mann's Heat. Which is just because I read a fact on Twitter about how for that scene, rather than like dubbing in the gunshot sounds, they actually like mic'd the street and captured all the gunshot sounds with like the blanks that they were shooting or whatever, which gives it to that like that really a realistic feeling. Those big like explosive like echoey gunshots on the street. And you have like the silence in between the gunshots and you hear the crowd running away and people screaming and stuff. And that scene and that film in general is just so fantastic. It's just unbelievable. I also realized too, it's one of many kind of movie scenes that you once you understand certain concepts about the role of the police, that you start to see differently as well. Because like, really you've got Al Pacino in Heat, and really it's his kind of almost obsessive pursuit of this guy and trying to stop this string of robberies. Like they're walking to their car walking out of the bank without a shot fired. No one has been harmed. There's been no real damage done. As De Niro explains when they're doing the robbery in the first place, he's like, the bank is insured. Like, this doesn't matter. You're not losing anything. We're not going to hurt anybody. And they do. They're walking right out of the bank. No problem. They're just about to leave. And then the cops show up. And then it turns into this like massive gunfight in the middle of the street with like dozens of dead cops, shot civilians, cars getting shot to bits, all kinds of damage, craziness going on. Little girl gets kidnapped. It turns into this absolute fucking insanity when it's like they could have just let these guys walk out of there and like nothing wrong, what would have gone wrong? What would have happened? You know, what would have happened? They would have stole a little money. They would have stole a little money from the bank. That's all. But because of Pacino's like obsessive fixation on stopping this crime, they show up and turn it into this absolute bloodbath, shit show, war zone right in the middle of the street. You know, like that did not need to happen. None of that needed to happen. And Pacino's friend gets shot. The cop played by Ted Levine. It's a great scene. Don't get me wrong. I just found that aspect kind of fascinating. In order to stop these guys from committing this crime in which no one was harmed and nothing bad even really happened. And they turn the street into this absolute war zone. Yeah, the money was just going back into the economy. That's right. Amazing scene though, an amazing flick. Heat. But the sound design, oh my goodness, that sound design in that scene is just fantastic. And no gunfight on film has ever really sounded like that. Harms nobody, grows the economy. That's right, Frank. That's right. Oh man, Doc, you've never seen Heat? Oh my goodness. I've never seen Thief, so I don't even want to criticize you too much there. But Heat is fantastic. The movie is just called Heat. That's right, Marty. Of course Marty's not seen Heat. Would be a good TRRS movie night, though, because it's a fantastic movie. Thief would probably be good as well. I've never seen Thief. I love Michael Mann. I love James Caan. I love the Heat, the aesthetic, the Thief aesthetic. I saw them losing the NBA Finals to Dirk Nowitzki. That was a great NBA Finals. I watched every one of those games. That was fantastic. I've always been a fan of the Mavs. I don't know if they're my favorite Western Conference team, but I loved that. NBA Finals, though. I was so happy that they won that. Anyway, I was just struck by that, though. I was struck by that watching that scene. None of that needed to happen. None of that massive war zone on the streets of LA needed to happen. But because Al Pacino needs to feel like a man. Al Pacino needs to feel like a big man by stopping this crime. And it turns into this gigantic disaster. Folks, will one generous chatter get us above the 20 mark? Will one generous chatter step to the plate and let us move on from this segment? Will one generous chatter step to the plate?
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob
thank you,
to
Diego.
talk you through all this.
Oh my goodness.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh my goodness. Diego, thank you for the 2 gifted subs, and thank you so much to G Cluppy. G Cluppy, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. That's very kind of you. It's me, Rob's top hater, the generous chatter. That's right. Even though she hates it here, that's how dedicated G Cluppy is to hating. Absolutely hates it here. And still subscribes. We love it. Thank you, G Cluppy. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you. Every single pause face of Buttigieg, just fantastic.
We need a new system. We need
Here's
a new
here's what Joe Biden was doing while Donald Trump was showing up and looking like a hero in East Palestine.
Not only realizable, but an imperative necessity.
One year ago, the Russian government decided to carry out what it called a special military operation in Ukraine, what the West calls the invasion by Russia of Ukraine. Today, we're going to talk about the Ukraine war 1 year in. Welcome to this week's episode of the Socialist Program. I'm your host, Brian Becker. In this week's conversation, we're going to be talking with Walter Smolarek. Walter is another colleague who helps produce and carry out the work of the Socialist Program, and we've been doing the show for more than 2 years. Walter is a journalist. He's the editor of Liberation News. And Walter is a close observer of international events. We're going to talk about the Ukraine war 1 year in. We're going to try to evaluate the state of the war, the state of the Russian economy, the orientation of the United States government and NATO, and the thinking of Vladimir Putin and the Russian government. We're also going to talk about how China views this war. Walter Smolarek, welcome.
Glad to be here. Well, Brian, I wanted to start by getting your thoughts about Joe Biden's recent trip to Kiev. I mean, he marked the 1 year anniversary, or the near 1 year anniversary of the beginning of the war.
Nice to see NATO treating... Sorry, let me get to your comment here. Nice to see NATO treating the conflict like a Marvel or a Harry Potter film. Now I can open the tweet that Lodane said like an hour ago, which I knew exactly what it was. God, it's so fucking bad. This tweet from NATO. Ukraine is hosting one of the great epics of this century. We are Harry Potter and William Wallace, the Na'vi and Han Solo. We're escaping from Shawshank and blowing up the Death Star. We're fighting with the Harkonnens and challenging Thanos. Jesus Christ. This is what our soy banter addicted childish comic book culture deserves. Oh yes way, Frank. Yes way. Did I tell you guys I got a bunch of people mad at the liberals today? No, you didn't tell us that, Stu. Yeah, and so I'm going to have to call bullshit on some of this stuff as well, comparing themselves to the Na'vi. Yeah, famously in the film Avatar and its sequel Avatar: The Way of Water, the Na'vi were getting, of course, armed and financed by the RDA, right? Otherwise, that analogy is perfect. The fact that Ukraine is being armed by the people who are very clearly depicted as the bad guys in the Avatar films. Or if you want to go to the Dune angle as well. Dune, famously the Atreides and Harkonnen battle in Dune was just this clear-cut battle between good and evil.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
An Iranian cleric mocked the U.S. by saying Iran would not be able to strike back in kind after the assassination of Major General Qasem Soleimani because the U.S. has only fictional heroes such as Spider-Man and SpongeBob SquarePants. Lol.
That's great. Marty with a solid reply as well here. Let's give, because the clout does trickle down. Thank you, Dimitri, for the 200 friend coin. Because the clout does trickle down. We got mod of the stream, Marty here. Imagine if Iran blew up SpongeBob. I think they should do it. It was a scathing analysis, absolutely. Like, again, America, I'm sorry to say, they absolutely cooked your ass on that one. That Russia invades. Well, that just happened. Putin's behind us, isn't he? That's good too. And what did you say, Stu? They didn't invite. Where's your comment? They didn't invite any non-liberal black MPs to the official Government of Canada Black History Month event. Stu, you're making moves. You're making moves over here. Fantastic. Anyway, that's the NATO post. Just unbelievably bad. Unbelievably bad shit. Let's continue with this video, though. You know, on the 1 year anniversary of the Ukraine invasion. It wasn't long ago that the neoliberal hero Tony Blair was cozying up to Putin because he wanted to slaughter some Muslims. I mean, deletion, this is exactly what we've been talking about, right? As much as people that like are promoting and supporting this war claim that anyone who is against the war, who doesn't want to arm Ukraine, is some kind of Putin sympathizer, when these very people are the ones that put Putin in power in the first place, right? The Western imperialist belligerence toward Russia is what led Putin to take power in the first place and was promoted by these very same people. Like we were pointing out the other day, he wanted to join NATO. They put him in that position. And now that they're trying to fight a war against the guy, they claim anyone that's against the war is like his supporter. It's like, who fucking put him there in the first place? When this starts happening eventually in the Balkans, I'll become evil. This is a warning. Even more so.
War. By traveling to Kiev, he announced a major new weapon shipment valued at $500 million, in line with the U.S. policy from the beginning of the war of just pouring more and more and more weapons into the war zone. He was also visiting Poland, which is a country that's taken a particularly hard line, a NATO country that's been pushing for the shipment of tanks, advanced fighter jets to Ukraine, always sort of the most escalatory policies. So this was a very aggressive, hostile, escalatory move by Joe Biden to visit Kiev, to visit President Zelensky. What's your take on the significance of this trip coming on the eve of the one-year anniversary?
Well, I think you can't mistake this as anything other than a commitment by the United States government, the full weight of the U.S. government, to have Biden personally come to Kiev in this secret mission and meet with Zelensky and go on TV in Ukraine with Zelensky and in front of the whole world on the anniversary of the Russian intervention into Ukraine. It's very, very clear that the U.S. is all in, that in fact, that this is a proxy war. The United States itself, Biden is basically saying, this is our war. He's taking complete ownership of the war. It's not the first time, but he's taking complete ownership of the idea that this is an American military
propaganda
effort.
to suggest that it's a proxy war.
And it's going to be very hard, nor is there any intention of Biden or any other political leader now to walk back from this firm commitment for all-out war with Russia in Ukraine. That means the logic of the war, as we have been saying on this program over and over again, the logic is going to be in the direction of escalation. People should just keep in mind that this was a gratuitous visit, meaning something that did not have to happen. It was an unnecessary effort by Biden. He didn't need to do it. He did it because he's signaling Russia. He's signaling the Ukrainians to keep fighting. He's signaling the rest of the world that the U.S. won't back down. And by backing down, I mean the U.S. won't go to the negotiating table, which if we go through the documents, and I want to spend some amount of time going over Vladimir Putin's speeches, the one that he just made to Russia, to the entire Russian nation on TV, but his earlier speeches from February 21st, 2022, February 24th, 2022, the day of the invasion, because Putin keeps emphasizing over and over again, we were ready to negotiate. We had drawn red lines. We said that Ukraine won't be a NATO power. Russia would not allow NATO and the United States, which is the principal power in NATO, to use Ukraine with this vast, huge border with Russia as a staging ground for advanced conventional and nuclear missiles targeting Russia, that Russia wasn't going to let that happen, that historically Ukraine and Russia had been one country up until 1991 and 1922, of course, when the Soviet Union was created. Russia and Ukraine constituted separate republics, but part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, meaning they were still one country, even though Ukraine had republic status, that there was no way that the Russian government under Putin, or I believe actually this would be true for any Russian government, was going to allow Ukraine to become a staging ground for a hostile power or hostile powers with weapons that, posed an existential threat to Russia. They weren't going to let that happen. And during that time, the U.S. steadfastly said, we're not going to negotiate. Russia's demands are non-starters. They said it over and over again, even as they were predicting that the result would be Russia would invade. And then, of course, Russia did invade. Putin's speeches are very interesting because he frames it politically. He frames it historically. Of course, Putin is not a communist. He's using an anti-Bolshevik and anti-Leninist framing. We want to talk about that. But the most important part about what Putin's speeches are trying to indicate is that the Russians were trying to come to a negotiated settlement, and they were rebuffed over and over and over again.
And like as we've been pointing out, Merkel lately has been talking about how the whole Minsk agreements they never had any intention of following any of those. Like we've been talking about, there was many off ramps to this conflict for beginning in the first place. And say what you want about Putin or Russia, but they were negotiating. They were offering solutions. And it was Ukraine that didn't follow these Minsk agreements that they were making at the behest of their NATO overlords, like Merkel clearly outlined. You know? And I think another interesting thing that we've talked about over the last year as well is that I think they were clear, the NATO people were clear with Zelensky and with people in Ukraine privately that Ukraine was not going to be allowed into NATO. Like they were saying, that's what they were saying to Zelensky. You're not going to be in NATO. But they were also saying, like, publicly, we've got to leave the door open. Well, why? Why did they want to leave the door open? You know, this is one of the ways that this conflict could have been avoided in the first place. If they had clearly said months or years ago, Ukraine will unequivocally not be part of NATO. That's what they were saying privately to each other. So why didn't they say it publicly? Because perhaps it's because they indeed wanted this exact conflict, because this is, as we've been pointing out time and time again, a Western proxy war. You know, that's what it's been since before it began. That's what it's been this entire time. And it's not Kremlin propaganda to point this out. There's a lot of evidence to support this. U.S. wants a piece of the energy supply action in Europe too. I mean, deletion, this is one of the things we've been talking about a lot. It's not just about Ukraine, but it's about getting Western Europe off of cheap Russian gas and getting them to buy at an inflated cost fracked gas from the United States of America. It's literally a way of subjugating Western Europe even further and ensuring that they don't have energy independence by working with Russia. That's why they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, as Biden promised that they would.
And then expected a major Western sort of acceleration of the struggle in the eastern part of Ukraine, and it was under those circumstances
this is after
that they
we cut off Europe
decided to
from oil from Iran
militarily
and then
intervene.
Syria too.
And as we discussed, Walter, Putin is
Interesting how
also
that works,
saying
isn't it?
there is an irreversible change now, not just in Russian-U.S. relations, but an irreversible change in the world situation, starting, as we said, once again, 1 year ago with the Russian intervention into Ukraine.
Right, Brian. Well, let's dig in a little bit more to Vladimir Putin's address to Russia, his national address, because, of course, these details never make their way into the mainstream corporate media in the United States. I mean, we purely get a 100% demonized view of the Russian government, of Vladimir Putin, or indeed of any government and leadership of a country that's in the crosshairs of the United States. So, for instance, here's a quote from this address. So Putin said, "Finally, in December 2021, we officially submitted draft agreements on security guarantees to the USA and NATO. In essence, all key fundamental points were rejected. After that, it finally becomes clear that the go-ahead for the implementation of aggressive plans had been given, and they were not going to stop." What's your reaction to that particular excerpt, Brian, and the overall framing, the historical narrative that Putin is putting forward in this speech?
Well, I think this is a remarkably important statement. First of all, is the statement true? Is it true? And two, if it is true, why don't people in the United States and Europe know about it? Because I think for sure people in the United States don't know, and the people in Europe, I don't think, know either, that Putin the Russians said in December 2021, meaning just 2 months before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that they came with a draft agreement on security guarantees for all of Europe, for Ukraine, for Russia, NATO, and the United States, and that all of the fundamental points that they had in their draft agreement. So they're bringing proposals. They're saying, here's how to end this conflict. Here's how to avoid a bigger conflict. Here is the draft agreement. And Putin is saying now in a speech that was televised just the other night on Russian TV that the U.S. and NATO rejected all points. If this is true, Walter, if this is true, it would seem to me to be a hugely important piece of information. And if the U.S. mainstream media cared about peace, wanted to save the lives of Ukrainians, they would be exploring this right now. What was it in Russia's draft agreement that Russia offered? I think what they offered would have been that Ukraine be considered a neutral country, that it not be considered a part of a Russian sphere of influence or a Western U.S. sphere of influence, but that it be neutral. Say the way Austria was neutral after World War II, and Austria didn't join either the Eastern or Western camp after World War II. I believe that's what the Russians were proposing. Now, if Blinken and Jake Sullivan and Biden and the Pentagon said no to that, the question is, why did they say no? If that was the way to avoid a war that by U.S. capitalist media's estimates has taken the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. They're trying to poke
the bear and the dragon at the same time. Well, famously, again, I know I'm only kind of an amateur military strategist, but when you want to win a war, what do you got to do? Every great strategist and general has always told you this. When you want to win a war, what you do is open up the war on two separate fronts. That's really the best way to go about it. Surely a winning formula for the good old US of A. Let's see how that pays off for them.
People either taken their lives or left them with life-changing injuries. If all of this could have been avoided by coming to an agreement and the U.S. and NATO and Zelensky rejected it, that would be a key, important, critically important piece of information. In a couple of weeks, Walter.
Well, and Deletion, look what you're saying. I saw quite a funny comment the other day, someone trying to chastise someone for not listening to Ukrainian socialists, and they said, I've been listening, I think they're wrong. The thing is, though, Ukrainian socialist parties have been banned. Ukrainian socialists are being accused of being Russia sympathizers and are being tied to telephone poles and beaten mercilessly. And then these Ukrainian socialists that we get lectured about are fighting alongside right-wing militias. Those are the ones that we're supposed to be listening to. Not, of course, the Russian sympathizing Communist Party members that have been banned from participating in the political process. Double the fronts and double the odds, as they say.
Large numbers of people are coming to the White House. It's the 20th anniversary of the U.S. Invasion of Iraq 20 years ago, March 19th, 2003. There's going to be a big protest at the White House. A big coalition of anti-war groups have come together for Saturday, March 18th. One of the demands is stop endless U.S. wars and NATO, but also go back to the negotiating table and come to a peace deal with Russia.
I haven't seen anything about it. I've been trying. I've looked and haven't seen anything. I don't know if there's anything planned in Montreal, but I'd be interested to know if there's some kind of a protest being organized for Montreal for that anti-war moment.
Russia to end the war in Ukraine, but Biden, by going to be with Zelensky on the anniversary and making a big show of it to the media, Biden is basically doubling down and saying, we don't care about negotiations. Now we want to win the war. And as Lloyd Austin said, he's the Secretary of Defense, General Lloyd Austin, our goal is to weaken Russia or to impose, as other U.S. officials have said, a strategic defeat on Russia, whatever that means. What it does mean for sure is that the U.S. has deliberately, calculatingly, purposely not engaged in real negotiations because it actually wants this war. So, this is the height of cynicism.
Conclusion.
If what Putin is saying in his speech is true, okay, if somebody can prove that it's not true, we'll talk about that. But if what he's saying is true, that they offered a draft agreement, a comprehensive agreement in December 2021, 2 months before the invasion, and the U.S. resolutely rejected all of it, that means the U.S. is actually responsible for this war. That means the U.S., in spite of all of the crocodile tears it's shedding for Ukrainians, actually doesn't give a damn about Ukrainians. They actually wanted the war for their own geostrategic purposes, and they thought the war would indeed weaken Russia.
This has been apparent from moment one.
And of course, another element of the hugely irresponsible, reckless nature of the U.S. policy in this conflict is that this actually raises the prospect of an all-out conflict.
I'm from the UK. I've not heard a single piece, not one, about any type of negotiation efforts. Of course, because when you talk about negotiating, that's Putin propaganda. And in fact, I think they sent Bojo over there to tell Zelensky, no deal. No deals with the Russians. Zelensky, old boy, don't make a peace deal with the Russians. Said something like that.
All-out confrontation, World War III between Russia and the United States. I mean, the element of Putin's address that the U.S. media is focusing on is his announcement that Russia is withdrawing from the New START treaty, a treaty to essentially limit
the testing,
at all production, and deployment of nuclear weapons. That's completely devoid of context, of course. The United States under the Trump administration withdrew from the intermediate range.
I saw the John McDonnell stuff was unfortunate.
Far more consequential in terms of European security than the New START treaty. But still, it does underscore the fact that while the United States is viewing this right now as a proxy war, where the Ukrainians are the ones doing the fighting and the dying in huge numbers, and Russian soldiers too, of course, this could actually become an all-out confrontation. This could spiral outside of anybody's control.
Indeed. Indeed, it could. And I want to talk about Putin's announcement. It comes right at the end of his speech, and people can get the speech for themselves. You can just, go online, use the search terms of the full text of Putin's speech, or you can go to the Kremlin, I think, has an English language version of the speech. But at the very end of the speech, at first he talks about why the invasion happened, what their goals were. He's talking about how the country is faring economically. He's talking about the sort of commitment and responsibility that the Russian government feels to people who have been conscripted, the families of people who have loved ones fighting in Ukraine.
Folks.
And then at the end, he basically says, "Oh, and we're pulling out of the START Treaty." And as you said, Walter, START Treaty was the last remaining piece of arms limitation or arms agreement treaties from the Cold War. There was the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty that was considered to be a cornerstone of U.S.-Soviet arms control architecture. That was developed as a way to prevent either side from becoming convinced that it could launch a first strike nuclear weapon. An anti-ballistic missile defense treaty basically says you can't create a missile defense shield in your country that would allow you to stop incoming missiles into your country. Now, that sounds like a defensive measure, but the point of the ABM treaty was to stop an offensive first strike strategy from being implemented by either side, either the Soviet side or the U.S. side. The logic here goes something like this. If a country can...
I love how liberals in the West are like, listen to Ukrainians, but they had zero interest about people in Donbass for 8 years. Yeah, and well, you want to listen to Ukrainians when they're telling you what you want to hear, right? Just the same. Listen to people in Hong Kong. Listen to people in Tibet. Listen to people in Taiwan. Listen to people in Xinjiang. But they only want to hear, if you're saying something very specific, they want to hear from you. If you're not saying what they want to hear, then you're not invited to weigh in on any of these things. Right? And just this idea, like Brian's pointing out, of suggesting that you like care about what happens to people in Ukraine when you're like supporting this ongoing fucking cataclysmic war in which tens or hundreds of thousands of people are dying. All people are doing is saying like, yeah, the way you support Ukraine is by making sure this conflict goes on forever and as many Ukrainians die as possible. That's the way that we're told that we have to support Ukraine. And that supporting ending the war is helping Putin. Stopping the violence, stopping the bloodshed, stopping this fucking meat grinder from claiming even more tens of thousands of lives. It's very silly. Like, and they're still talking about getting Crimea back. Not only are they not negotiating, not only are they going to not negotiate, not only are they going to drive the Russian horde out of eastern Ukraine, but they're taking Crimea back as well. Like, this is delusional. This is absolutely delusional. Talking about we're getting to talk about invading Transnistria, which would be another escalation. Weird they didn't listen to Ukrainians when Ukraine cut off Crimea's water supply, because that's the thing. There's only certain people that qualify as being Ukrainians, right? They're these like right-wing nationalists. Then we want to hear from them. But the like ethnic Russians who have lived in Ukraine for generations don't count as being Ukrainian. That's the whole purpose, like, right? Those people have been basically carved off of the Ukraine, carved out of the whole idea of what Ukrainian identity is since 2014. They're not treated like they're part of Ukraine by the government in Ukraine and their NATO masters. And yet, they also really care about the idea of the part of the country where these people live becoming no longer being part of Ukraine. That's also very offensive to them at the same time. right? So they don't count as being part of our culture or our country or our national identity that we've kind of built up from over this multi-generational project. They don't count as being part of that. But if they try to leave the country, we're going to bomb them into oblivion until, of course, Russia invades, and now we've got a big proxy war on our hands.
Launch preemptively a first strike nuclear attack targeting the missile silos of the enemy.
And also, just to clarify something I was just saying, I don't want to suggest that anyone in Ukraine that's like been radicalized by this or doesn't like Russia or is upset that there's a war happening in their country. I don't want to claim that every single one of these people is right wing. I don't believe that that's true. I don't. But I think the point stands about which Ukrainians we want to listen to in our media and which ones we don't want to listen to, and who counts as being a Ukrainian voice that needs to be amplified and who doesn't. A lot of libs genuinely believe that Russians are inherently evil. It's in their blood. Again, in our culture, which is just founded on the transatlantic slave trade and the genocide of indigenous people. And just massive amounts of bloodshed and murder and genocide and theft. And we claim that Russia is the culture that's violent. They're just inherently violent, you know? Always projection. It's always projection, whether it's about Russia or whether it's about China or whatever. Whatever the official enemy baddie of the day, whatever the accusation is, it's always projection. They're invading another sovereign country. This has never happened before. Joe Biden's saying this without a hint of irony. No other country has ever invaded another sovereign country since World War II, Jack. America is saying this. Like, it's just unbelievable. And people believe it. That's the really amazing thing.
And take out, say, 95% of their military capacity in the first strike, but they still have 5% of their missiles that are still intact and can be launched in retaliation. A missile defense shield, while it couldn't pick up 100% of incoming missiles if it was the full arsenal, might be able to pick up the 5%. And so having outlawed missile defense shields, it's basically the Soviet Union and the United States were saying, we understand that nuclear war has become unwinnable, that if either side launches it, it will mean probably the extinction of the human species as we know it and all living things on the planet Earth. We're going to create this arms control architecture so that neither side actually comes to the conclusion at some point later under some other administration that they can win a nuclear war. In 2002, George W. Bush abolished the ABM. Didn't abolish it. The U.S. left it. And then the U.S. started creating missile defense shields in Europe, in Poland, in Romania. In other words, they said at that time, Walter, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they kept saying, well, we want to catch possible incoming Iranian missiles, which of course is a joke. The real purpose was to start to create a missile defense architecture by NATO in the Eastern European, Central European countries that were formerly Soviet and Russian allies when they were led by socialist governments. So Bush abolished or left the ABM. And Putin said about 10 years after that was a game changer for the Russians. Then the U.S.
And baby-brained Americans only understand territorial sovereignty. Sovereignty doesn't apply to interfere with the country's political process, or their economy, of course. And like we talked about with our friend Radio Free Amanda, the IMF is a big part of like why this conflict is taking place in the first place. And how now Ukraine's being completely gutted by the Western powers that claim to be like protecting Ukraine, protecting Ukrainians, completely destroying whatever labor protections are left and just priming it for complete IMF exploitation, debt trap diplomacy.
As you pointed out, left the INF treaty.
But that doesn't count towards violating sovereignty, right? That's all in the name of protecting their sovereignty.
Medium-range missiles that had a flight time of about 6 or 7 minutes to their targets that might be 300 to 450 miles away. That was important because the U.S. under Reagan had been encircling the Soviet Union with exactly those kind of weapons. That led to the massive anti-nuclear movement, the freeze movement in Europe in the 1980s. But it led also in 1986 to a treaty signed by Gorbachev and Reagan in Iceland to do away with those kind of weapons. In other words, destabilizing weapons, because they had such a short flight time. The other side couldn't defend against them. It would put all of the defense on a computerized automatic trigger response, meaning it was a destabilizing weapon. So the U.S. and the Soviets signed that treaty in 1986, and then under Trump, the U.S. left it. The U.S. has also been violating basically the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, whereby both the U.S. and the Soviet Union pledged that they
Usually
would not
doing
use
more
outer, they
industry
would
is
not militarize
nationalized,
outer
not
space and use
privatized
outer
and
space
sold
as
to
the new
foreign
high ground.
investors.
And
Yes.
now the only treaty left was the START
Usually.
Treaty. And basically, Putin said, we're leaving the START Treaty. It's no longer applicable. We're not going to violate the treaty. But if the U.S. and NATO start to violate it, we no longer feel compelled to adhere to it. So you're right. We're moving step by step by step in the direction of a nuclear confrontation. And, at a certain point, when the U.S. adopted major power conflict as its operational strategy and doctrine, and that happened in 2018 under Trump, but it has not been reversed by Biden. In fact, has been reinforced by Biden.
And breaking the outer
Major
space
power
treaty.
conflict as a doctrine
Or
actually
space
becomes a
law book in
self-fulfilling
college. That's
prophecy,
cool.
because as the U.S. readies itself, prepares itself, and also engages in actions both in Ukraine and Taiwan, which clearly demonstrate that it's ready for and is already engaged in major power conflict as a proxy with Ukraine and with Russia, this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We are moving in the direction of major power conflict by the biggest nuclear powers in the world. Just so people understand the dimensions of the nuclear weapons, the U.S. has about 2,700 nuclear weapons that are ready to go.
And then, of course, you complain about like
airplanes,
China and others
the
with
B-1
the
or
space
B-2
stuff.
bomber, B-52 bomber,
How
or they're
dare
in
they?
missile silos, intercontinental ballistic missile silos, or they're on submarines. And any one of those Trident nuclear submarines, and there's 12 of them, every submarine has 120 nuclear warheads that can destroy simultaneously 120 different cities. One submarine. So these are United States is ready to go, but in addition to the operational weapons, it has another 5,000 or 6,000 nuclear weapons that are ready, could be made operational within a very, very short amount of time. So both sides are armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons, and the U.S., the Biden administration, having rejected, if it's true, Russia's offers for a comprehensive agreement in December 2021, prefers to play nuclear chicken with the other major nuclear power in the world. Really disgusting.
Such an unbelievably dangerous situation for every human being on the planet. I mean, every person on Earth has an interest in seeing this policy of constant escalation pursued by the U.S. government come to an end. So, of course, there's the military dimension to the conflict, which is primary. But this conflict is also playing out in the economic arena. When the war started in February of 2022, there was a comprehensive sanctions regime imposed on Russia by the United States and by the major Western European powers, as well as Japan. Japan heavily sanctioned Russia, too. That was widely expected to cause an economic depression in Russia. A total economic collapse was widely predicted, widely expected. But
Okay,
the
this guy
news
knows
just
a lot of
came
stuff. I
out
think he's
within the
forgetting about
last
a little
couple days
factor called
that, in
Vladimir
fact, last
freaking
year,
Putin.
Russia's economy shrank only 2.1%. Only 2.1%. In fact, a relatively mild recession, not total economic catastrophe as was predicted. What happened? Why has Russia been so resilient, and what consequences has that had for the world?
Well, I think it is pretty surprising, and I think it must have surprised the United States. It doesn't mean that Russia hasn't been impacted negatively by the sanctions. I mean, Russia has been basically evicted from the world economy. The Nord Stream 1 pipeline, the Soviets earlier, before Russia became Russia only and not the Soviet Union, the Soviets had built a pipeline and then a second pipeline to Europe to bring natural gas. That was gas coming from Russia or Russian territories. Then there was Nord Stream 2, the latest additional pipeline.
Putin wants to conquer Europe.
Biden and Blinken and Victoria Nuland, by the way, if you remember, before the war started, they promised that the U.S. would end Nord Stream 2 if there was a military conflict. And then there was explosions that destroyed these two pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2.
That was just
Seymour
a
Hersh has
coincidence.
said that he has proof that it was a special unit in the Pentagon that carried out the destruction of Nord Stream 1 and 2. The American officials were celebrating after its destruction. Weirdly, the American media
So is that Polish
started to blame
MEP,
Russia for blowing up its own pipeline, which is, of course, ludicrous and bizarre.
husband of Anne Applebaum, who's a Western historian, who's a central figure in the creation of these, like, the sort of pushing this double genocide Holocaust theory. And remember her husband, the Polish MEP, after the pipeline blew up, he was like, "Thanks, America." Like, Really, just couldn't be more clear. But still, people want to put their heads in the sand over this, I guess.
But in wartime hysterical media coverage, like anything goes. But, the loss of Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, these are big losses for Russia. The fact that Russia couldn't have other normal transactions with what would be its
Pepto State, you're coming through some extremely cringe comments here, but enjoyably so. These guys talking all this nerd stuff about nuclear escalation and Nord Stream 2. Well, meanwhile, in the real world, we're out here trying to defeat literally Voldemort. Thank you. Even though just saying that name made me a little uncomfortable. Obviously, we don't say that over here because we take that lore very seriously. But thank you, Pepto State. Is there a generous chatter that has a gift sub for Pepto State? This is the question.
Natural trading partners in Europe, especially Germany. That undoubtedly is very impactful. Because of the conscription in Russia, also a number of Russians who are especially middle-class people with professional skills who have the means to avoid the draft by leaving the country, that we know that happened. So there's been undoubtedly negative economic consequences, but it's quite right what you're saying,
so
Walter.
Much, Diego.
It wasn't the catastrophe that the U.S. was predicting.
And so does Pepto State.
And Russia was obviously preparing for a plan B in the event of this developing into an all-out conflict. But most notably, and by that I mean, in other words, stockpiling materials, making alternative trade plans, maybe making alternative arrangements with China, with India, with parts of the third world. And I want to talk about how the third world and Asia. If
we could just get rid of Putin, then surely the state we've crippled with sanctions would become stable and possibly even good. Well, that's the amazing thing. Like, the sanctions haven't even fucking worked to do that. Like, Putin looks like a hero to people in Russia right now. Yeah, maybe Navalny though. Maybe we can keep beating that dead horse. This guy who has no actual constituency, no path to actual any kind of victory, electoral or otherwise, no popularity. He's literally just this like Western-backed dude that they can just keep trying to promote, making documentaries about him and stuff. Yeah, he's ready to take over any moment now. Russia's really going to respond well to that.
So-called third world, global South, let's call it the global South, has...
Russia remembers what happens when Western puppets take over their country. We all remember what happened last time, and that happened, and it was just a real piece of cake for everyone that lives there.
Viewed the Russian Ukraine war and the U.S. proxy war with Russia in Ukraine, how they are viewing it, not just the people, but also the governments are viewing it quite differently than the way it's being presented or viewed in Europe or the United States. Those countries have actually increased their trade with Russia, meaning that Russia has another part of the world that it was able to sort of swap up with in terms as trade partners. So you may have some of the facts, Walter, I'm not sure, but the economic data shows a very large-scale increase in trade with India, an increase in trade, of course, with China. And I want to talk about the Russian-China relationship in a couple minutes. Also in Africa. And by the way, in Africa, a lot of Africans, not all, of course, but I think a substantial part of the population in Africa feels that the U.S. is the empire that took the place of the colonial empires that oppressed, divided.
How can you believe that they think that? It must be because of Kremlin propaganda. Why would people in Africa ever believe that? Oh my goodness. It must mean that they're somehow more susceptible to this kind of Putinist, tanky propaganda. Oh man, that's very frustrating. Very unfortunate that they would believe that the United States took the reins of the neo-colonial movement and has been directly interfering in political happenings across the entire continent for decades. I blame social media. That's right. Me too.
Has a global rival that's willing to fight back.
Got the best propaganda,
Russia.
but also
I'm not saying this because
that's right.
I'm saying that's the right idea. I'm just saying it's
And
true.
he's also
This is
gay.
the way lots of people, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in Africa and Latin America and Asia are viewing the war. Quite different from the way people in the United States or Europe are viewing the war. But obviously, Russia it's a big country. This is really important. And I think, Walter, we need to do a little bit more research into about Putin's speech, some of his economic indices. But, when you think about it, the Soviet Union was a country that had a landmass that stretched all the way from the Pacific to the eastern part of Europe. It was the largest
the Nigerian
landmass
election
country
stuff is
in
so
the
weird.
world.
It's like they talk about other countries doing electoral interference, and then you see them just putting together this like slickly produced like video, like telling Nigerians who to vote for in their election, with the U.S. Secretary of State just being like, "Hello, Nigeria. Here's what you're going to do in this coming election." But of course, that doesn't count that's freedom. That's freedom delivery. That's not political interference, obviously. Oh my gosh. John. That's very silly. That's very, very silly.
And Russia, even though it's no longer the Soviet Union and has lost important parts of the territory, the non-Russian republics that are now independent, it still has this vast area.
I'm going to try and
Soviet
get Brian
Union
Becker to
was the
come on
most
this show.
blockaded, embargoed, and sanctioned country up until that time ever. But the Soviet Union developed a kind of self-sufficiency. Stalin called it socialism in one country, if you remember, and that was a debate that was taking place in the communist movement, including inside the Soviet Communist Party, about could you develop socialism in one country. But this one country was so big that it had vast resources, vast natural resources, vast spaces, and it was able to have self-sufficiency because it created its own internal, separate sort of economy, a planned economy, a centralized planned economy that was not under the impact and influence and domination of the world economy, which was indeed a world capitalist economy. So my point is the Soviet Union
looking at
became
it, I'm going to say
self-sufficient.
yes.
The Russian government is no longer socialist. It's no longer the Soviet Union, but it has the experience of how to utilize the country's resources with self-sufficiency. And that means strengthening the state sector. So even though it's no longer led by a communist party, Putin is an anti-communist, there are elements of the state sector in the Russian economy using these vast resources at its disposal and having natural trade partners with China, with India, and others in the global south. The success of Russia, again, it's not without problems. I'm sure that they've suffered a lot as a consequence of all the sanctions, but they have survived, and they're showing a certain resilience that I think has probably taken Washington by surprise. You may have some of the numbers about the trade. It's really quite interesting.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the phenomena that you're talking about is maybe most dramatic in the energy sector, in oil, gas exports, which is really the core of Russia's trade with the rest of the world. So for the entirety of 2022, Russia actually increased its oil output by 2%, and they boosted oil export earnings by 20% to $218 billion. These are figures that come from the International Energy Agency. So that boost in oil export earnings is because the price of oil skyrocketed on the global market as a consequence of these sanctions imposed by the United States, by European powers. So that actually led to a major increase in the amount of revenue that Russia was able to generate. To underscore the point that you were making about the importance of Russia's trade relations with India, Russia's oil exports to India have grown by a factor of 16 since the beginning of the war, 16-fold. So now it stands at 1.6 million barrels per day of oil exports to India. That's as of December of 2022. And another factor, as you mentioned, is Russia's relationship with China. China recently moved away from the zero COVID policy and towards a policy of pandemic response that involves fewer restrictions on economic activity. That's led
he strikes
to
me as a jazz head as well.
In economic growth, economic activity in China, and that's having a major positive impact on Russia's economy as well. China is importing much more oil than it had, maybe just a few months ago. Now it's at 16.3 million barrels per day. A lot of that is coming from Russia, and as that economic activity steps up, the demand for Russian energy sources will remain elevated. This is really different than what the United States.
Have you touched on the recent flurry of Western diplomacy in Africa? U.S. Treasury Secretary did a tour. Of course, a special agent, Tulsi Gabbard, as well, as she informed us, the anti-war, anti-imperialist Tulsi Gabbard. Joe Biden's doing a tour now. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov did a tour a couple weeks ago, and Macron said he was going to do one in a couple weeks. I mean, I think it's partially because, Baldwin, I mean, we have talked a little bit about this. Yeah, they sent Jill over. It's over for Lavrov. That's right. Because they know that they're losing Africa. It's like they know that they're losing the global south in general. They know that they're losing Africa and Latin America to Chinese influence, and the fact that China has replaced them as the top trade partner. Same with Western Europe as well, and that's what this Ukraine conflict is about. Practically, is ensuring that Western Europe remains under the control of the United States and doesn't go into the China camp, despite being replaced by them as a trade partner, top trade partner as well. So it's like, and they see the way that like they've tried to get these places in line on Ukraine, right? They're former colonies. In Africa, you got to back us on this. You got to back us on Ukraine. And Africa is just saying like, no, we're not going to do that. Even places like India and Saudi Arabia are like, nah, we're not going to back you on this. Even these very like, kind of reactionary allies, Western allies. So I think it's a sense of desperation, right? They see that this is kind of slipping away from them. They see the inroads China has made in Africa and with the Belt and Road. They see how Africa is at the very least neutral on Ukraine and sometimes is like openly supporting of Russia. So yeah, now they're once again in classical U.S. style, they're realizing way too late all these things have escaped them, and now they're trying desperately to make up for that. And as we all know, that's not going to happen because people in Africa have memories and remember, like Brian was outlining, remember like what America has done in Africa over the last 70 years or so, and are not buying what they're selling when it comes to trade or when it comes to Ukraine. The people in Africa know what it's like to be
Rob, seriously, wow.
Oh my goodness. People in Africa know what it's like to be a U.S. proxy. They know what happens when the United States comes in and wages a proxy war in your country. Like they're not, like they understand this shit. Brittany Hitch. First 10 gifted subs in the channel rockets right up to the elite tier of the friendship triangle system. Brittany, thank you very much. That's extremely kind of you. Thank you. That was wonderful. Brittany Hitch, 0 messages in the channel. I don't think Brittany even subscribes to the channel. New elite tier best friend. That's right. My goodness. Maybe that was some kind of mistake. Brittany fucking around with no chaos zone. Maybe it was some kind of a mistake. Brittany tuned into the channel and saw me saying this stuff and was like, I'm going to give this guy a piece of my mind. And like her finger slipped on the phone and accidentally hit the 10 gift sub button. I don't know. Or like the phone gets wet and you see the drip of water dripping down and it's like, bloop, 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 bloop. Gift subs. Brittany, thank you very much, though. Whether it was on purpose or by accident, I certainly appreciate it a lot. And we're not going to go and accuse Brittany of, working for being in Langley or working for, any kind of nefarious intelligence agency. We're not going to do that over here. You didn't even need to lick any eggs to inspire such generosity. I know. It's wonderful. It's Christopher Hitchens' daughter here to debate you. Oh my goodness. Wow, that was wonderful. Thank you, Brittany. Let's continue with the video. But again, just to answer the previous thing, Baldwin, I think that's what a lot of that is about. Everything we're seeing from America right now with the balloon freakout, trying desperately to get Africa to be friends with them again, or in Latin America as well. It's this reeks of desperation, right? The desperation and the fear is just palpable that they're losing their status, that they're losing their place, being the kind of unquestioned overlord of these, what they consider to be like their colonies or their territory, And everything that they're doing just reeks as being this kind of like desperate overreaction to this basic fundamental shift in power that we're seeing right now. Thank you again to Brittany for the 10 gifted subs. That was very kind of you.
States had in mind at the end of the Cold War, where the U.S. would be the unipolar power. No other power could challenge it on a global or even regional basis. But in fact, we have all of these economic powerhouses that have emerged in the last 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, this has really been an indispensable factor in Russia's economies, the Russian economy's ability to withstand what's happened over the course of the last year.
And also, Walter, BRICS, which is this other organization along with the Shanghai
Mexico as well. Why are all these they're all
some other
stepping out of line?
Multilateral entities that are considered to be a rival, or at least not a rival, but really an alternative to complete U.S. hegemony. The BRICS countries were Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Major economies. Now, under Bolsonaro, it was a question about whether Brazil, which is, of course, the largest country in Latin America, was going to sort of just be a stooge.
We talked the other day about, I can't remember what weird dipshit was talking about it, but getting upset about AMLO in Mexico for giving a award to President Diaz of Cuba. And they were going, that once went to Nelson Mandela. This is how disgraceful Mexico has become under AMLO, ignoring the complaint. Yeah, that was that CBC journalist that we made fun of the other day. Evan something, this legacy journalist. I never watched this media in this country, so I have no idea who these people are. I know Carnoba was upset at me that I couldn't remember this guy. Bayer? Something like that. How dare AMLO give this award to the president of Cuba? That was once given to Nelson Mandela. Ignoring the long history of friendship and cooperation between Mandela himself and South Africa and Cuba.
The United States, the way the NATO countries are, or the way Zelensky is. But Lula won, and Lula, too, the U.S. was trying to kind of conscript the new Brazilian government to go in a different direction. But I think what Lula did and what Lula said, and the attitude of Brazil, and especially South Africa, of course, China, very noteworthy in terms of other countries that don't want to live under unipolar U.S. domination. And so they've taken a different tack towards the war. Not that they're for the Russian military invasion, but they're definitely taking a different tact.
Yeah, I mean, just to review a couple of instances of that. I mean, right now there are military exercises
regime
going on
change. Oh, good.
The Russian and South African
don't get him going
navies,
on that.
Major
that's when the war crimes start happening. When
that, the South African government was under a lot of
peace-loving liberal hero David Frum gets going on that kind of regime change talk. He loves peace and democracy so much that when he starts talking like that, thousands of people die. The anti-Trump resistance hero. He correctly identified the orange man as being bad, so you got to hand it to him.
Pressure to cancel, but they refused to do that. And the South African foreign minister has actually made many comments since the beginning of this conflict about how her country will not be bullied into choosing sides by the United States. Olaf Scholz, the leader of Germany, the chancellor.
I got to say, too, I really appreciate how one angle, this has been so informative, I think, for me and this community, but one angle that Breakthrough News has consistently kept at the front of their analysis and coverage of this over the last year is what are people in the global south saying about this conflict, right? Because that's been so helpful, that analysis. I think when people say, like, you see these like LaRouche guys or whoever that are doing this whole like Russian chauvinist thing and waving the Russian flag and doing the Z symbol and like just like fully and unapologetically supporting Putin. And Breakthrough News is simply asked, like, pay attention to what people in the global south are saying about this conflict, and you'll see a more realistic picture of what's going on, right? Like, you'll see when you just pay attention to what people in the global south are saying, you'll understand that this isn't just this black and white story about the good old US of A stepping in to defend freedom and democracy. Right? People in the global south understand who the antagonists were in this case. They understand what it's like, what NATO does, and what these proxy wars do in your country, and what the United States does to provoke these exact kind of conflicts. This is not the first time this has happened. It's not even the first time that it's happened recently. This is what America and the West and NATO and the imperialist, capitalist, hegemonic powers have been doing for the last several decades in the global south. And people understand that. And when you don't need to fetishize Russia or be a apologist for Putin or a Russian chauvinist to just look at what people in Latin America and Africa are saying about this conflict and how they're at least remaining neutral and many times correctly identifying who the aggressive parties in this that led to this conflict were. MTG and Coulter said we should invade Mexico. I, for one, look forward to Pancho Villa Expedition Quagmire Take 2. Seriously. And by the way, get both of those on the anti-war rally for the People's Party and the Libertarian Party. Because they sometimes say things about Ukraine that make an iota of sense. Let's make sure we put them on there. Put them in our coalition. Taking cues from all the major socialist parties in power. That's what I mean. I think that's been really valuable to me. Keeping that at the front and center of the analysis of all this. And it's prevented me and us, I think, from having this kind of childlike Marvel-ass understanding of who the good guys and the bad guys are in this case.
Of Germany, went to Brazil recently. He, as you were mentioning, tried to sort of conscript the new Lula government into this effort, but Lula firmly rebuffed that. He said that Brazil was a country that was interested in peace, not in exporting weapons. The president of Mexico, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, has similarly spoken out strongly against NATO's overall role in this conflict, making sort of broad geopolitical critiques as well. So it really has been an opportunity, I think, for a lot of leaders of countries in the global south to express their independence, express the view that the world has changed and that the United States can no longer simply issue dictates. I mean, this has got to be something, Brian, that really deeply disturbs the policymakers at the Pentagon and at the State Department.
Indeed. And the BRICS country, it's not like the old socialist camp where there was an ideological component to the unity of the socialist camp. So it was the Soviet Union and China, North Vietnam, North Korea, the Eastern European governments that were led by communist parties, then Cuba after the 1959 revolution. Those countries they were socialist. They had a socialist integrated sort of second globalization, a second world economy. They did their own trade and aid with each other. There was like an international division of labor, economic.
Mac, I don't trust these people, no matter what they say about any of these issues. I don't trust them. It's a cult-like movement that has connections with the CIA and the feds. So I'm going to have to go ahead and disagree with you on that one.
Economically, and there was a cohesion because they were led by communist parties, and they at least officially all said that they're socialists or communists. So there was this ideological component to that camp. What we are seeing emerge, and especially as after the Russian military invasion of Ukraine a year ago, but it wasn't just then, it was also before then, is the emergence of a group of countries who are not ideologically bound together. Again, China is led by the Communist Party of China, led by Xi Jinping. Russia is United Russia, led by Putin. Putin is an anti-communist. He's denounced Lenin and Lenin's nationalities policies a year ago when he announced the invasion or the intervention into Ukraine. They're not ideologically the same, but they're major countries, they're developing countries or stronger countries. They're strong enough to be independent. They're big enough to be independent. They don't want to be dominated by the United States. And so they're being brought together, sort of not based on ideology, even though it appears a certain symmetry to the old.
Yeah, I know that they've been protesting the war in front of AOC and other politicians, and I've criticized AOC and these like kind of democratic socialists or anarchists or liberals or whatever you want to call them for having shitty positions on this conflict from the beginning and allowing people like these LaRoucheite types to go in there and organize around these issues by pointing these things out. I still don't think we should trust these people, though, even though they might use language that might be appealing to us sometimes.
Post-World War II, two camps world. It's not like that.
They're conservatives that are trying to build a coalition with transphobes, anti-vaxxers,
a nationalistic
and
policy.
MAGA Trump insurrectionists.
A conjunctural congruence of interests that bind them together. And with that said, Walter, I want to make mention of the fact that the other really interesting thing that is developing right on the anniversary of the war, you have Biden going to Ukraine, basically telling the rest of the world that Ukraine is now an extension of American power, or at least a part of an American sphere of influence. And the U.S. is completely committed to winning the war for Ukraine. You have Putin as the leader of Russia going on TV talking about what's going on with the war, but also announcing that there is as he put it in the first sentence of his speech, a radical and irreversible change in world politics, meaning the end of the unipolar era that started with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the socialist camp. So Putin is talking about it. And then the Chinese government's ministry.
I actually, like Baldwin, I actually don't agree so much that it's stupid to protest against them. I think, like, if you're a mainstream Democratic politician and you claim to be, like, progressive, you should be held accountable for having shitty views. Like, or when you rubber stamp the Biden administration's, like, nonstop arming of these proxies, you know? My point is, like, when people like AOC and Ilhan and these progressive Democrats have shitty and pro-NATO views on this, it opens the door for these fucking weirdos in the LaRouche cult or whoever else to start making these arguments, you know? And if they were carving out a space in the Democratic Party to make these criticisms or to advocate for ending the conflict or diplomacy or anything like that, it wouldn't empower these exact types of people. But it's true that they don't have any power in foreign policy. But I think their rubber stamping of this conflict isn't meaningless either. And they've got a lot of people that listen to what they have to say. And if AOC or Ilhan Omar talked about the role that NATO had played in provoking the conflict, I think a lot of people would be listening to them. So I think it's very disappointing that they haven't done that. But for sure, they don't have the power to actually do anything. Of course they don't.
Of Foreign Affairs, not the party, not the Communist Party, but the Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement also timed to coincide, I believe, with the anniversary.
They think they can build some kind of mass line like Mao in 2023 in the US of A. But again, it's not even coalition building when you're immediately taking LGBTQ people out of your coalition. You're taking people that are fighting for racial and social justice out of your coalition. You're taking people that care about having public health policies out of your coalition. They're not even really doing a mass line. They're just creating a conservative movement that has, like, a sort of different foreign policy analysis.
Of the invasion. Maybe it's coincidental. I don't know, but it's hard to think that. The headline of this new document, and people should get it for themselves. You should read it. Everybody should read it. It's called U.S. Hegemony and Its Perils. And it's got a table of contents: political hegemony, throwing its weight around.
I saw the U.S. ambassador to China respond to this too and just make a fool of
Foreign
himself.
Ministry used to talk like this in the 1960s, but it hasn't talked like this in a long time. Chapter 2, military hegemony, wanton use of force, again by the U.S., economic hegemony, looting and exploitation, technological hegemony, monopoly and suppression, cultural hegemony.
China is putting up with less and less shit on the part of the U.S. And look at this response, like to the paper that Brian's talking about there. He says this is crude. He's talking about this paper that came out, U.S. Hegemony and Its Perils, which actually seems kind of interesting to read, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the PRC. And he says this is crude propaganda and unworthy of a great power. The United States remains ready for meaningful cooperation to tackle shared global challenges. Like, does anyone believe that? Does anyone fucking believe that still? Like, give me a break. No one believes this. So their response was very funny.
Number 5, spreading false narratives. Walter, this is an incredible document. This is an all-out comprehensive statement by the Chinese Foreign Ministry accusing the U.S. of attempting to be a hegemon, a unipolar power. And they say it's a peril to the world. And they review all of the crimes of U.S. imperialism and all of its efforts to suppress countries, impose economic sanctions, seize the assets of other countries. They talk about the war in Yugoslavia, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the destruction of Libya, the proxy war in Syria. It's really a remarkable document. And then it goes through the entire history of the United States and cites like 400 different U.S. interventions, most of which are in Latin America or in the Americas, but are far-flung in
How
Korea,
dare they
Vietnam.
bring up basic
It's like
history
an
about what we've done.
anti-imperialist document from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. And ever since China was sort of integrated into the world capitalist economy, ever since China was allowed into the World Trade Organization, not ever since, but for those years, the language of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was very mild. It was the most radical thing would be kind of win-win. Our advance doesn't come at your expense, meaning you're the U.S. empire. Can't we be friends? The kind of this yearning for normal relations. Well, if China is now describing U.S. hegemony as the principal problem in the world, that means the Chinese government has taken a decision.
It's almost like
and
imperialism.
I think you could see also by...
It's almost as if imperialism remains the primary contradiction, doesn't it? I don't know how anyone on the left can be okay with working with a group that has such a long and sordid track record of infiltrating and wrecking Marxist groups. And you can't be fooled by the language. Again, like you can point out things that they say that we agree with that are correct, but like you have to have basic pattern recognition as well and see what's going on there. You got to be smarter than that.
Blinken's meetings with the Chinese foreign minister, I think it was the foreign minister or Chinese diplomats in Munich this week, the U.S. is on the path to taking a very, very hard line. All of the media headlines are the U.S. must prepare for war with China in Taiwan. We now know that the U.S. has been secretly training Taiwan's military forces, and Taiwan at the same time has been acknowledged by the United States in the Shanghai Communique of 1972, reaffirmed in another communique in 1979, reaffirmed a third time in a communique in the early 1980s, that Taiwan is part of China. And yet the U.S. is developing a military strategy around Taiwan, an island that it acknowledges as part of China. It's such a flagrant, provocative way to carry out relations with China.
All the social chauvinists are now Marxists. Don't
almost
laugh.
Self-fulfilling again, because Taiwan is the cornerstone and has always been the cornerstone of...
It's amazing how much of modern discourse gets annihilated in the first fucking 15 pages of that. It's really phenomenal.
U.S., the normalization of U.S.-Chinese relations. Anyway, this is a remarkable document. U.S. hegemony and its perils. I haven't seen anything coming from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs like this in a long time. It shows that the Chinese, Walter, have come to the conclusion, not that they were for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but if U.S. imperialism and NATO are able to defeat Russia, which is their goal in Ukraine and beyond, that just accelerates the coming war between the United States and China. And so the Chinese, while they say we want a negotiated settlement,
they've had enough of our shit.
They really do. They want the war to end. They also don't want and are committed to Russia not being defeated, because it just means that the theater of war, because there's an endless U.S. imperialist war drive underway, the war will move from the Ukraine, from Eastern Europe to the Pacific, and it'll be towards China. Anyway, a remarkable statement from the Chinese government.
They've had enough of our shit.
Yeah, Brad, let me just read one excerpt from it that I think underscores the point that you're making about what a sweeping critique.
Are we in the end game now,
This
Matt?
is under the section military hegemony.
Kinda
Since it
feels like
gained
we are
independence in
sometimes, aren't we?
1776, the United States has constantly sought expansion by force. It slaughtered Indians, invaded Canada, waged a war against Mexico, instigated the American-Spanish War, and annexed Hawaii. After World War II, the wars either provoked or launched by the United States included the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, the Kosovo War, the war in Afghanistan, the Iraq War, the Libyan War, and the Syrian War, abusing its military hegemony to pave the way for expansionist objectives. In recent years, the U.S. average annual military budget has exceeded $700 billion US, accounting for 40% of the world's total. So I completely agree with you. I mean, quite a remarkable document. And it really shows that this is the crux of a global conflict, a global struggle. And the question is, will the United States, will U.S. imperialism maintain its stranglehold over the entire planet in the 21st century?
Right.
No, it will not.
And, I want to clarify, too, as we wrap up here, Walter, as we're moving towards the finish line, is that, we're socialists. We see that the struggle for peace and against militarism is linked to the struggle against poverty, the struggle against exploitation and oppression of all types, and that the solution to the danger of current war is to end the system of capitalism. So we're not fighting for a multipolar world. We're fighting for a socialist world where peoples of different nations and ethnicities can truly live in peace.
And like Vijay Prashad was saying on this show the other day, I don't even think China wants a multipolar world. What they want is a world of multilateralism, where other countries are free to make trade deals with each other, free to pursue their own economic interests without being interfered with. They don't even want to be a pole. They don't want to be a hegemon. But it's because this is the only thing that America understands, this is what we're being forced towards. But I think that was a really interesting clarification from Vijay on this show the other day when he talked about this. It's very reasonable, like what China and what these other countries are actually looking for here. But we'll never give it to them, no matter how reasonable it is.
Because there aren't capitalist corporations having an expansionist agenda for new markets, new exploitation, etc. So there could be the economic basis for actual peace would be created. That's what having a socialist world would look like. In other words, the capitalist classes in different countries would be gone, and people could actually have sisterly, brotherly, familial, good relations with each other rather than endlessly spending money for death and destruction. So we're socialists. And our solution is not multipolarity. Multipolarity doesn't solve the problem of endless war, growing war, and even the prospect of World War III, because as long as capitalism exists, and as long as imperialism exists, and as long as the U.S. imperialist sort of apparatus exists, and it can only go away really if the people in this country radically transform our society, as long as it exists, the danger of global war continues, just like the danger of climate catastrophe only grows ever bigger. There are many other cascading crises in society besides war and the environment and the climate, but those are two big ones. And so we need a socialist solution. But having said that, we can also understand that in the here and now, in 2023, the idea that some countries are banding together to prevent, at least in the short term, unipolar domination by the U.S. hegemon, by U.S. capitalism, U.S. imperialism, using the Pentagon sort of basically as its military strike force around the world. And as the Chinese point out, and as Putin pointed out in his speech, and again, we're not political supporters of Vladimir Putin, but they pointed out correctly, objectively, the U.S. has 800 military bases around the world for the purpose of global domination. No other country has that. So to the extent that we see the emergence in this new
it's not
world
when you invade
order,
another
which,
country.
as Putin said, is radically
Imperialism
different from
is
the old.
having 800 military bases around the world. Imperialism is dominating other countries politically and economically without invading. It's not just like, well, it's when you engage in trade with another country. It's when you invade another country. That's not what these words mean. There's been a lot of confusion about this, unfortunately.
One and irreversible, meaning that it's going to be the end of unipolar U.S. domination and a new stage of multipolarity and increasing struggle. We recognize that countries in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Asia, the countries that have been the colonized, dominated parts of the world for centuries, they don't want to live under U.S. unipolar domination or any foreign domination. They want to be free, independent, and sovereign people. And so, Walter, this era is truly on us. It's a new era. It's very important for progressive, working class, socialist, anti-imperialist forces, including people who have all kinds of different ideologies, to come together to stand for peace, to stand against militarism, to stand against the war machine. And I want to urge everyone who's watching this show or listening to this podcast, come to Washington, D.C. on March 18th, 12 noon at the White House. We're going to have a march. We're going to have a major rally. It's going to be a broad coalition of organizations. If you're in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, there's going to be a demonstration, a similar sister demonstration there. A large number of organizations are working together for this. I could just say the Answer Coalition, the People's Forum, Code Pink, UNAC, Black Alliance for Peace. I'm probably forgetting some key organizations, but there are literally hundreds of organizations that are coming together. And if I haven't mentioned you, I apologize. Coming together to stand together against imperialism, against militarism, against war, and for social justice. And so we urge everyone on the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War, say no to endless U.S. wars. Join us at the White House, 12 noon, March 18th. And if you want more information, if you want to see about transportation from your area, how to get there, if there are buses or car caravans coming, go to the website, answercoalition.org. There are many other websites of the anti-war groups that will also have similar information, but I'm part of the Answer Coalition, so I know that you can go to our website, answercoalition.org, but become part of this new movement. We're going to keep this discussion going. You're listening to the Socialist Program. I'm Brian Becker. We were joined today by Walter Smolarek. Walter, thank you so much.
And thank you to Brian Becker and the Breakthrough News team for that segment. Brian's just been an invaluable resource, I think, for me and for all of us. Like, since before this invasion even kicked off, properly analyzing and putting the geopolitical situation in Ukraine into the proper context and making sure that we all understood exactly why these things were going on. It was extremely helpful for me and for all of us, I think, to understand these very complex issues, with Brian helping to break that down.